You're tuned into the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Zeno Pucks. Here are your hosts, Andy and Brian Matusi.
All right, July 1st is come and gone. A whole lot of shit went down the last week or so. This would be a day that I really, truly wish I had Andrew here with me doing the pod, but nonetheless, he is still on this trip, and time stops for nobody. So we have a bunch of stuff to go over on today's Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast presented by Zeno Pucks, and I'll be taking you guys along for the ride. So I'll just start off by saying first and foremost that I am not by any means going to cover every single signing that happened. I grabbed as many of the big ones as I can. Some of these may have slipped through the cracks on me, but I think I've pulled together a list here that will best cover the free agency, and I got as much as I could from each team. There's a couple teams that I don't think I'm even going to mention on today's pod, but I think I got like 22 or 23 teams on the list. So there was a couple in NX. Okay, real quick, I'm recording this after the fact. For whatever reason, about 30 seconds of audio is chopped out of the original recording. All I was trying to say here was that there was a couple of inactive teams around free agency, and then I transitioned into the opening segment where I started to congratulate Bob McKenzie on a great career and a great retirement, but the back half of the first section and the front half of the next section kind of got chopped off for whatever reason. I don't know if it was a connection issue or an audio issue or what, but I'm here rectifying it now. So just wanted to let you know why there's going to be a weird drop off in audio before and after this. Anyways, back to the show. Just real quick, want to congratulate him on a great career, retiring after 48 years covering hockey. So, drafts, free agency, trade deadline, all that. He's been a huge part of TSN, and some American viewers will remember that he chipped in a lot on the NHL on NBC as well. So Bob's been around the sport a long time, one of the biggest insiders in the game, probably the only guy you could put up there with Friedge as far as the magnitude of his, what he says and what he hears. So just a great career overall, a great guy, very well beloved by hockey fans. So we're going to miss Bob, but he was already kind of partially retired leading up to this in his own words, but now he's going to be fully retired. So he's headed up to cottage country to enjoy some peace and a well-deserved retirement. So congrats, Bob. All right, now we'll get into the hockey stuff. So I tried to organize this by trades and then contracts. And when I do the contracts, we're going to have to kind of do this like a lightning round where I'm just kind of rattling these off and giving a couple of thoughts on each one. We'll try to make it quick. But first, let's start with trade between the Preds and the Vegas Golden Knights. Nick Hague goes over to Nashville in exchange for Colton Sissons, Jeremy Lauzon, and I think there might have been a pick in there that I didn't write down. But Nick Hague then extends with the Nashville Predators 4 years, $5.5 million per year. This is a rare win for Barry Trotz in a trade. Lauzon was, an everyday defenseman, definitely. But I don't know. It's just weird to see Barry Trotz win a trade. Colton Sissons was a great player. He was captain of his AHL team in Milwaukee for a while. Pretty crucial part of their Stanley Cup final run that they went on in 2017. So pretty well-loved guy in the fan base, but obviously it was time for a change. I think it was a good time for a change of scenery for both players. I think Lauzon was just kind of spinning his tires most nights. Not that he's a bad player, but more so that he just never really had a solidified role. He was just kind of a lineup filler. So I think he'll maybe get a few more looks in Vegas, and maybe a refreshed lineup and play style may help his game. And Sissons, I think you can plug and play him in just about any lineup in the league. He's just a very effective player. For Nashville, they get Nick Hague, who again is one of the best young defensemen in the league. They lock him up for 4 more years at a pretty healthy cap hit, which is good given how much, how many big contracts they shelled out last year. When you look at the Stamkos deal and the Marchessault deal and the Brady Shea deal, that Brady Shea deal that's a long one. That's a big one. That's a big contract. Even now with a rising cap, it's kind of a big hit, but Preds also bring in Nick Perbix too, who I'll mention his contract a little later on. And actually, we can get to that now. That's $2.75 million a year for the next 2 years for him. Again, so they lock up two good young defenders. Obviously, they still have Yossi there, but he's 35 now, which is insane that he's 35, and Brady Shea's 31. So I think the Preds will probably be a little bit better this year than they were last. If they can get even better play out of Fedor Svechkov, I think they'll be very happy with that. Zachary Leroux has a great chance to make a good name for himself in this league as one of the good, tough-nosed young forwards. To me, he kind of reminds me of that traditional power forward style of player, but hasn't obviously had a chance to really make a name for himself in the league. So the Preds are in a kind of a seesaw point here. This could really tilt one way or the other. On one side, this really talented core group of players they have, yes, they're aging, but they're still really good, and Forsberg's still only 30. Given the amount of veterans on this team, there's a chance that they could turn this whole thing around and have a really good season. Saros, who had a kind of a rough year last year for the Preds, could really just go back to his normal form this season and make him a top 3 team in this division with ease. The other side of this is these guys continue to get older, the play regresses a little more, and then the seesaw swings hard the other direction, and this whole thing just kind of implodes, which would be a worst case scenario, I think, for Preds fans. I don't really think anyone wants to see that. So we'll see what happens for the Preds, but as far as this trade goes, Nick Hague's going to be a great fit in Nashville. Again, one of the great young defenders in this league. So I like the fit, and again, a rare situation where I feel like Barry Trotz came out of a trade ahead. So good for them. All right. Let's move on here. This is a quick one, too. Vladimir Tarasenko going over to Minnesota for future considerations. Not really a blockbuster type deal by any means, but again, for Minnesota, you got to fill out your roster. They unload that god awful Freddie Gaudreau contract. You bring in Tarasenko, who, they didn't get Besser and Brock Nelson like they wanted, and given the contracts those guys signed, I think it's probably better that they didn't. I would have really liked Besser here, but I think it was Michael Russo that was saying, really, I mean, Tarasenko had more points than Brock Besser last year. And I know Besser's dealt with injuries and stuff too, but that's the other side of it is, do you want to deal with a guy that's not healthy for a full season most of the time? And I like Brock Besser as a player, and it'd be cool if he came home to play with the Wild instead, but he didn't. But for the Wild, they get a guy that could be good for 20 to 30 goals at his best now, even at 34 or however old he is now, 33, sorry. But it's a low-risk move for the team. 1 year left on his deal. So he'll have a chance to play with Kaprizov and Danilo Yurov, who's coming over as well. So a couple of Russians on the team there that he can, maybe kind of build a brotherhood with. And if he likes it, he can stay long-term. But we'll see. The Wild still have a lot to do, and we'll get to them later this offseason. All right. Moving on, we have Matias Maccelli. He gets traded to Toronto for a 2027 third-round pick. So Utah just offloads, maybe a player that they just don't see a fit for long-term. Obviously, Utah, who we'll get to in a little bit, it is quickly trying to expand not expand their roster, but strengthen their roster. And it's really starting to look like they could be one of these teams pushing for a top 3 playoff spot in the Central next year. I mean, they really have kind of turned this roster over quickly as far as getting the waste out and bringing in guys that they know are locks to perform pretty well. So we'll see. For Toronto, though, they bring in good young player, Matias Maccelli. Will have a chance to, again, that's another roster where everything's a little uncertain right now outside of Matthews and Nylander and Nyes. You don't know where Tavares is going to play in the lineup. They get Nicholas Wadler. There's going to be opportunities for anybody that comes through Toronto to play high up in their lineup and earn those second line spots. And so I think Maccelli's a guy who at his best could perform well enough where you could put him, you can use him as a top penalty killer, or you can use him as, a net front guy on your power play, or just a guy that you want to slot out on your second line because you like the brand of hockey he brings to support your high scoring talent. So we'll see what happens. It's another situation where it's kind of a low risk move for the team and for the player. So we'll see how that goes. Victor Arvidsson goes to Boston, and this is one where I'm kind of surprised. The return for the Oilers is a 2027 fifth-round pick. This is a great spot for the Oilers. I dogged on them hard recently, just as far as their cap situation. I was like, you're married to the Kane contract. You're married to, you got to find a way to offload Arvidsson, even though he did want out. they kind of put themselves in a tough spot. I'm just like, how are you going to re-sign Bouchard? What are you going to do about the goalie situation? So on and so forth. Well, granted, they still haven't addressed the goalie situation, but you know what? They got Bouchard re-signed. Maybe a little bit too much money. Maybe not. We'll see. But they got Bouchard re-signed. They unloaded the Kane and the Arvidsson contracts, which I think offloading Kane kind of hurts. Losing Perry to a divisional rival kind of hurts. But they're not. This is still a team that I think is not the right look for another deep playoff run. I think losing guys like Perry and Kane really does hurt in the long term. I think a healthy Zach Hyman will make all the difference too, but the Oilers, they did get Bouchard re-signed. It's just looking at this lineup, it still is a concern for me that this is the last year of Connor McDavid's deal. And so far, and now granted, they did get themselves out of a little cap trouble, but again, with the Bouchard re-signing, they only have $175,000 in cap space. I mean, they are right up against it, and they were not able to address their goalie situation. So, barring something miraculous, this might be tough for the Oilers next year. It really will. Again, Ekholm's not getting any younger. Zach Hyman's 33 now, which is crazy. The Oilers do bring in Mangiapane too, which I do think helps kind of alleviate that Kane loss, and I think Mangiapane's a little more level-headed player, but at the same time, he's not as good as Shitster too. So he's a good hockey player, but did you do enough to bridge the gap there by unloading a guy like Kane and a guy like Perry? So we'll see what happens. And they did end up bringing Kapanen back, but there was mutual interest there, and so he ends up coming back. I just don't know. A lot of it will ride on Matthew Savoy and the level of play he's going to bring as such a young player. I think there's going to be a lot of high expectations on him now, given that again, this team went to the final 2 years in a row, and you lose some of your key contributors. I think a lot, rightly or wrongly, is going to be expected of this young player. So we'll see what happens. But I don't like that they did not at all address their goaltending. I'm sure they tried to, but John Gibson, probably the biggest name they were going after, goes to Detroit. Jake Allen, another name that would have probably been popular, ends up taking an absolute sweetheart deal on both sides in Jersey. He gets longevity and a place to play, and they get a cheap backup goalie who at his best can be like a 1B starter. So that's a great situation over there that we're going to get to later. But for the Oilers, it's still a good enough roster. Obviously, still a playoff team, and who knows? At this time next year, I mean, we could be talking about they just made another deep run, but I start to grow a little bit concerned with just the construction of this and the steep amount of money invested. I mean, we made fun of the Maple Leafs for all those years with the Core Four and the big contracts, and the Oilers have kind of done a similar path here where, now granted, the level of players much better. McDavid and Draisaitl are obviously, McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard, that's probably a better top three players than, Matthews, Martner, and Nylander or Tavares was. And, so it's a little bit different, but it's still a lot of money they got tied up in just a couple of players. So we'll see. We saw it not work in Toronto. I'm worried that the Oilers may head down a similar path. And again, in the final year of Connor McDavid's contract, that is a risky game to play. But let's focus on the return of this for the Bruins, who again get Victor Arvidsson, a guy who not the best player in the league anymore. Obviously, in his younger days, he was kind of a firecracker player, a lot of speed, good shot. But I think, again, with the kind of hockey the Bruins play, I could see Arvidsson being a very effective player, a very good penalty killer. I could see him being a good one-time option on a power play. Not like Pasternak is, obviously, but the Bruins are in a really goofy spot, too, right now. And so adding guys that'll fit their brand of hockey, and they added a couple of them, I think it's a good return for the Bruins as they continue to look to build a team that can get back into the playoffs. So we'll get into the Bruins a little bit later. As I did mention, they did bring in a couple new players, so we will get to them at a little more length later. I just want to bounce back to the Oilers again with this contract for Bouchard. Again, it's a cheap enough deal when you think about the cap think about the fact that the cap is going up. But just with the way the roster is right now, and given the timeline where it's McDavid's last year, this contract could age very well for the Oilers, but you just worry that you commit too much money at the wrong time, and it's going to cost you the best player your franchise, arguably the best player your franchise has had ever, if not since Wayne. It just is what it is. But we'll see. The Oilers are it's just a rough spot. And again, I know they brought in Mangiapane to replace Kane, or kind of replace Kane, at least fill the slot in the lineup. I just don't know if it's enough with them. They worry me. Not as much as some other teams, but that's rough. That's one where you could see the story having a really bad ending, like we just saw in Toronto. All right, let's move on. The Hurricanes get K'Andre Miller in a sign and trade from the Rangers. That deal for Miller is 8 times $7.5 million per year, so 8 years, $7.5 million per year. The Rangers get Scott Morrow, a 2026 first round and a 2026 second round pick. I think, given all things considered, I think this is a perfect move for both teams. I think the Rangers get a really good haul for a guy who clearly was not going to be there long term. You get a prospect, you get a couple of good picks. For the Hurricanes, you get another guy to add to your long list of really stout defensive players. And I think playing in this system will further extend the defensive abilities of K'Andre Miller. I kind of like his game anyways, but I think in this system, he can, again, learn from guys like Jacob Slavin, who are the best in the business at this. So it's a really cheap deal with a lot of term. If Miller ends up working out there and he's a really effective player and he can be top 4 every night in the defense pairings, this is going to age as one of the best deals in the league. So we'll see what happens. I obviously pick on the Canes a lot for, again, just not ever addressing that goaltending. They started to address scoring finally, and I think offensively they're better, but the goaltending worries me. But this deal for Miller, I know there is a potential for it to flop on them if Miller doesn't end up playing very well there, given what they gave up to get him, but this has a chance to age very, very well for them. So I'll hold out hope that this is a deal that just ages like a fine wine. So we'll see. And I think there's a couple of, looks like I got one more deal in Carolina. So we'll get to them shortly. And then we'll look at their whole cap situation as we go through this. All right. So Vegas, we mentioned their trade earlier, sending out Nick Hague for Colton Sissons, Jeremy Lauzon. Vegas had a very, very busy free agency. So first, let's mention Alex Pietrangelo, likely to miss the entire season, likely to be done playing hockey, as we've learned the last few days. He needs a bilateral femur reconstruction, if I wrote that down correctly. So likely looking at a situation where a Hall of Fame career is going to be cut a little bit short here. But if that is the case for Pietrangelo, you know what? Olympic gold medalist, 2-time Stanley Cup champion with 2 different teams. So and one of the best defenders, one of the best voices of the game, one of the most skilled defensemen. He's a tough son of a bitch. Guy you would hate to play against, but one of the best in the business. So if this was it for Alex Pietrangelo, a tough way to end his career, but certainly a Hall of Fame career when the time comes. So for now, though, Vegas has to look to move in a different direction now. So obviously bringing in Lauzon, as I mentioned, going to be a guy who's probably going to get some playing time because they're going to need a warm body there. I know that Vegas obviously is going. The big deal isn't Pietrangelo or Lauzon. We're going to get to the big deal in just a second, but we'll see. You lose a guy like Hague, who is a huge part of your Stanley Cup run. You lose a guy like Pietrangelo, who is a vital part of this defensive core. It's tough, and change happens over time in sports, but that's going to be a tough one for Vegas to swallow on the back end. Now, sometimes you can bring in a player, a generational like talent who can score at will. And sometimes it makes all the difference. And you can talk about whether or not he's done it in the postseason, consider the fact that he was with Toronto, but Vegas through sign and trade brings in Mitch Marner on an 8-year, $12 million a year deal. It was to contract worth $96 million, the same deal that Mikko Rantanen just signed with the Stars. And look, I know that he has not got it done in the playoffs, but when you look at the situations in Toronto and Leaf fans, you may want to cover your ears for this, but just the overall lack of execution up and down the Leafs lineup every time they get into the most clutch moments in a playoff game. I start to wonder if it's a organizational thing or if it's a player thing. And with Mitch, I really don't think it was a player issue. I really think this is a guy that's going to flourish in another system. I really wanted my own team to go out and get him. I really would have loved to see him in a Wild sweater. I think a lot of fans would have liked to see Mitch in their own team sweater, but Vegas with just the ultimate heel move, brings in Mitch Marner. And you know what, for the Leafs, they get a good return. They get Nicholas Waugh, who's again another guy who is a good part of Vegas's run to their Stanley Cup, and certainly no slouch of a player by any means. I mean, he's going to slot right in with them. He's either going to be second or third line minutes every night. So Toronto, who is going to lose Mitch anyways, I will give them credit. Brad Treliving goes out and gets a guy that he can slot directly into his roster, no questions asked. And so I will give them credit there. But for Mitch, I really think, again, he's going to have the opportunity to play with a guy like Jack Eichel. I mean, and again, he just played he's played his entire career with either a center of Austin Matthews or John Tavares. This guy has played with plenty of skilled players, but to go play with a guy who's got that Stanley Cup pedigree like Jack Eichel, and he's going to get to be surrounded with guys like Barbashev and Mark Stone and Pavel Dorofeyev, who ironically is the reason that Mitch can't wear number 16, but he's going to be surrounded with guys who are equally as talented as he is. And under a good coach like Bruce Cassidy, I really think this guy, I mean, we already know Mitch is a good regular season player. He's good for 100 points, good for at least 90. And I love this move front to back for Vegas. It's a lot of dough to invest in a guy who hasn't played a single second for you. And we know Vegas has their cap shenaniganery that they've done over the years. In fact, right now Vegas actually sits almost $7 million over the cap. But again, once Petrangelo's deal hits LTIR in the regular season, they'll be fine. So this is also the last year of Jack Eichel's contract too. So this kind of feels like you need to go all in and go for it one more time year with this group, because you look at Vegas. So now Marner makes actually the most money on the team, which is crazy. But Jack Eichel's got 1 year left. Riley Smith just extended there, so he's probably maybe another year or two before he looks at retirement. Brandon Saad's got 1 more year. Pavel Dorofeyev, who's going to be due a big pay raise if he continues to play like this, is making $1.8 million this year. That number's going to fucking skyrocket. And he's an RFA after this season. Colton Sissons, 1 year left. He's making $1.5 million. Again, a low risk option to have on your team. But Vegas is going to have to do some dancing here with their salaries. Again, Pietrangelo is probably done, so you don't worry about his contract. But Theodore and Hanifin, who are still in White Cloud too, who are still in their primes, are locked up for the next few years. The back end's pretty solid, actually. They just locked up Caden Korczak too. So you pretty much have your 6-7 defensemen that you need. I mean, Theodore, Hanifin, McNabb, White Cloud, Jeremy Lauzon, Ben Hutton, and Caden Korczak. You have 5 bona fide NHLers, and really 6 if you count Korczak too. After signing that deal, he better be. But the forwards is where I start to worry. Just with the deals with Jack Eichel, I mean, again, he'll be 29 after next season. He's probably going to be, if he's staying in Vegas, looking at another. Well, actually, with the new CBA kicking in, actually, I believe he can only. I don't know if he can extend for 8 years or 7 years, because we're still under the current CBA. So I think technically he can still extend 8 more years. But for Jack, he's probably going to be making a little bit more on this next deal. I mean, if he stays here, it's going to probably be a little bit more money, or, who knows, maybe he takes a team friendly deal and stays right where he's at to not bump his cap hit up anymore. I don't know. But this just kind of feels like a moment for this franchise where you got to go all in and try and win another cup. And they have the talent. They do. Vegas is a really good team. There's no denying it. There were the rumors about Tomas Hertl going to Carolina that were just that. And so thankfully he stays there. And again, for Mitch Marner signing there, if it doesn't work out with you playing on the wing on Jack Eichel's wing, oh, bummer. You have to go play on Tomas Hertl's wing, who's another guy who can dish you the puck and who can also finish. And so they have 2 lines of guys who can score and set each other up. I mean, this top 6 is going to be lethal. So I'm excited. All these guys, I mean, Stone is quote unquote the old guy at 33. Now, granted, he's dealt with plenty of injury problems in his career, but that's your quote unquote old guy on the front end. On the back end, Brady McNabb, who's 34 as we sit here, is the, again, quote unquote old guy. But again, this is a team that's in a pretty solid spot to try and run it back in with Mitch. Again, I just firmly believe that in this organization, he's going to be extremely effective. We know he's going to be a killer in the regular season, but I think playing with a group who knows how to get it done in the playoffs, I think it's going to make the world a difference for him. And we'll just have to see what happens. We'll just have to wait and see. But I have a feeling that Vegas is going to be one of my favorites to come out of the West next year. So overall, a good day at the office, or a good week at the office, really, for Kelly McCrimmon. Though Vegas just gets so much done here. It seemed like they were Mitch's preferred destination from the beginning. So the fact that they get him, and they get him at what seems like a somewhat friendly deal, given the numbers you were hearing if he was going to stay in Toronto. I don't know. I just like it a lot. There's just a lot to like here. But again, for Vegas, this just feels like this has to be it, because the future is so uncertain when you have, half your forwards are on deals that are expiring at the end of next year, or guys that aren't extended now. I mean, Cole Schwind's still an RFA. Alex Holtz is still an RFA. Those are guys that you probably want to get re-signed, if not for another year or two, just to keep them in your lineup, because they're good players you can plug in when you have injuries. And a guy like Victor Olofsson, who's closer to 30 now, he's a UFA. I don't know if he plans to re-sign there. I don't think he's re-signing there if he's still a UFA at this point. But they have a couple RFAs they need to address. But as far as the roster goes, this, again, with the future being uncertain, this just feels like one where you got to go all in now. And to their credit, they did. So let's move on here. Real quick, we'll mention too, Glenn Gulutzan, head coach of the Dallas Stars. So obviously Dallas, kind of a nightmare ending to the playoffs this season, especially with how much momentum they had going into the conference final. It just felt like they were an unstoppable force. And yeah, it kind of blew up in their faces. But Dallas, again, another team where I just feel like you can't really count them out. And I don't agree with all of the moves that they've made, but we'll get to their contracts and maybe a little later on in the show. How far down are they on my list here? I should have had done this on video so I could have shown you guys this long ass list of notes I had. But that's okay. We'll get to Dallas's contracts a little bit later on in the show. But yeah, Glenn Gulutzan, again, assistant in Edmonton, previously head coach elsewhere, I believe in Calgary. I want to say he was at one point the coach of the Stars before. I don't know why that sounds right. But yeah, he was the coach of the Stars in the early 2010s. Okay, that's why the name makes sense. All right, so let's move on from there. Again, we'll get back to the Stars and their contracts shortly, or a little later on in the show. I want to go back to the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. So I almost verbatim said I don't want to speculate on too many of these moves because it could all sort out so quickly, and then all the speculation was just wasted breath, and I'm kind of glad I did. So Sam Bennett, obviously we know, extended with the Panthers. He takes that, or let's see here, let me bring up their Puckpedia. So he takes an $8 million a year deal, and I believe that is for 8 years. So great deal for him to stay with the Panthers. That is way less than the $10 million I predicted. And super team friendly deal. And we talked about how are they going to keep all three of Marchand, Ekblad, and Bennett. Well, they did. They extend Ekblad at an unbelievable 8 years, $6.1 million per year. Just an absolute killer deal for Ekblad. Super team friendly deal. And so he gets to stay there. And again, him and Gus Forsling are just going to continue to be world beaters on that top defensive pair. And Brad Marchand, who signs the funniest contract ever. 6 years, $5.5 million per year. This contract will take him until he's 43, which, you know what? The cap hits low, but it gets him the amount of money he would have wanted out of a short-term deal. So instead of paying him, $10 million a year for 3 years, they pay him $5 million a year for 6. So he gets the big contract. He can still retire whenever he wants, and the Panthers will just have to eat that cap. But for them, the chance at a three-peat here, I mean, they have 10 players in their lineup that are locked up until 2030 or later, which is just incredible. They sit right now a hair over the cap, but obviously I'm sure there'll probably be maybe some more moves that haven't been made yet that could happen later this summer. Again, I talked about maybe moving a guy like Evan Rodriguez potentially. That move would actually slide him right under the salary cap ceiling. So maybe something they look at doing. I don't know. But the big thing for the Panthers is if they can navigate the waters with the salary cap this year, not only is the cap going to go up by quite a bit again next year, but Sergei Bobrovsky's deal, which this is the final year, it'll pay him $10 million a year. That expires, and if he's not going to retire, which I hope he doesn't because he's still playing so well, If he's not going to retire, you imagine him coming back at a fraction of the cost to help this team. So we're looking at a Panthers team here, which is quickly poising itself to own this league for the next half decade or more. I mean, we're really talking now. Again, these players will get older, and eventually the fire dies out a little bit because a lot of these guys are late 20s, early 30s. So actually, all these guys are late 20s. They might just kill the NHL for the next half decade. Okay, never mind. Yeah, they might just kill the entire league. But Bob, again, making $10 million against the cap. That's going to end after this season. The Panthers are going to be in a really good spot where if they need to tweak their lineup to add players, this cap is exploding and having a deal like this fall off the books and being able to bring Bob back at a fraction of the price. I mean, we're talking about a team that over the next 2 years could essentially free up like $20 million in cap space and go after more big names to bolster this lineup. Folks, I think the Panthers might have created one of the best rosters we're going to see in the next 20 to 30 years. I mean, this is incredible looking at their cap friendly. Yes, right now they are over the ceiling. And again, there maybe have to be a move they have to make. But when you look at their contracts, and again, you look at like an Evan Rodriguez type who's making the exact amount of money you need to move out, there's potential here where they could do this and slide in under the cap without any shenanigans. And that to me is nuts. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But just an absolute masterclass by Bill Zito. This guy, I don't know how he doesn't win GM of the year. I don't know. This is crazy to me. Okay, little magic of editing there. Of all times to call me from while he's over in Italy, Andrew actually just called me as I'm talking about the Panthers. So I do like the timing of that. That did make me laugh. But yeah, to go back to what I was saying, the Panthers are just in a really good spot here. And again, it's not perfect. Again, if you look at the back end, Kulikov's not getting much younger, but again, he's locked up. Nico Mikola's probably going to want to raise it from 2.5 after next season, but their big three defenders, Jones, Ekblad, and Forsling, are all 30 or 29 years old. And so, again, it all goes back to having a solid core to build around. Their forward core is locked up until the end of time. It's not going to be perfect, I think, for their defensive group. But again, when that money from Bobrovsky comes off the books, you give a guy like Mikkola a raise, you retool around your core defensemen to give them good depth and good support and guys that can fill in if there's an injury. And so it goes back to what I was saying of, I just think the Panthers really hit this right on the head. And this could be one of the best teams we see, for the next 20, 30 years. It's so hard to find a true flaw in this lineup, outside of the fact that guys will eventually not be 29, but I mean, that's a pretty silly way to look at it. So just on the surface, this team is unbelievable at how it's constructed. I mean, Barkov, there till 2030. Kachuk ends in 2030. Sam Reinhart, 2032. Sam Bennett, 2033. Carter Verhaeghe, 2033. Brad Marchand, 2031. Anton Lundell, 2030. And even Luostareinen's locked up for a couple more years, which he'll be looking at a little bit of a race too in due time. But man, dude, this team is just really well built. So it's starting to get to that territory where I wonder, do they run this right back and get a third one? Only time will tell, but for the time being, there's not much to say other than that this team is so well built. It just is. And again, I mentioned the back end's not 1,000,000% perfect, but it's hard to do that. It's hard to be perfect up front and on the back end, and they're about as close to it as you can be. So, just a great job by Bill Zito. Not much to say on the Panthers, the defending Cup champions, and looking at this roster and the rest of the league, it's not much of a reach to say that they should probably be the favorites to do it all again next year. So we'll see. Time will tell. Let's move on here and talk about the Hurricanes now at length. So I've picked on the Hurricanes a lot, and it sucks that I don't have Andrew here to do this because I would like to have a slightly less biased opinion, I guess, if you could put it as that. I don't even want to say I'm biased. It's just being tired of seeing the same shit over and over again. Hurricanes lock up Logan Stankoven, 8 years, $6 million a year. It's a really good deal. Again, with the cap exploding like this, it's a really low risk deal. Stankoven is actually still going to play this season in the final year of his entry level contract, so he's still only making $800,000 this year. So this deal could age very well for them. Look, I picked on the Canes a lot for not going after scoring and not addressing their goaltending. And while we'll get to the goaltending in a sec, I want to say them adding Logan Stankoven and then signing Ehlers to 7 years, $8.5 million per year. They went out and they addressed their scoring issues. They got guys. They extend a guy that's young and has the potential to be one of the great young goal scorers in this league. And you bring in a guy like Ehlers, who's right in the middle of his prime, and when healthy and at his best, again, he's a very quick skater. He can be a great scoring threat. So they're not the sexiest names. It's not like bringing in a Marner or something like that. But you know what? These are still very effective players on a team that's already pretty well constructed for the most part. I do like this a lot for the Hurricanes. And again, you combine that with the fact that K'Andre Miller's coming in and he's only 25 and Jacob Slavin's 31 and he's still there for a while and still the best shutdown defender in the league. And Chatfield's, still a great defender. Shane Gostisbehere, it sucks they lose Burns and they lose Orlov, and the hope obviously is that with Alex Nikishin or however they're going to plan to say that over there, the hope is that he can bridge the gap there too with losing minute eaters like a guy like Orlov can be and a guy like Burns can be, which we'll get to Brent Burns later. I can't believe he's still playing. But again, the hope is with this Nikishin is that he is the next big thing there. And if he is, this Canes team is going to be, again, one of those teams that's really well constructed. Most of their core is locked up for a long time. Seth Jarvis is there until 2032, Aho 2032, Ehlers now 2031, Stankoven 2034, Will Carrier, that's a long-ass contract for him. Not really part of the core, but again, it's, pennies on the dollar, $2 million a season with the cap in this situation. I don't like the Jesperi Kotkaniemi deal. I don't think anybody does, but you're in it. And with the cap exploding, not the most money that, not the worst deal in the world, especially if he can, again, he's still only 25. He could find another gear or change his play style to suit a new role and be a very integral part of this lineup. So the ship has not sailed with Kotkaniemi. I know it's not perfect there, but there's still a chance for this guy to rebound and figure out a new style that fits him and the team. The issue I have with the Hurricanes now is still the one they won't address is the goaltending. And I just kind of picked on the Oilers for this too. Obviously, this doesn't work with Skinner as your guy over there. When are we going to give up on Freddie Anderson? I know his deal goes at the end of this. His deal is going to expire at the end of this season. So this kind of feels like this is a last ditch effort to get Freddie Anderson to win one here. I think this is actually a new deal, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go scroll through their contract signings, but either way, I don't like that they're sticking with Freddie Anderson. I understand you want to give your goalies as much time to develop as possible, but eventually you have to give Pyotr Kochetkov the reins to this and hope he can be the guy, because I think Freddie Anderson's giving you more than enough of a sample size to show that he's not the guy, especially when you look at the fact that the Hurricanes, unless I'm missing something here, have $10.6 million in cap space. Just give Eric Tulsky a real quick round of applause for that cap management. That's incredible. I did not know they had that much room. So look, maybe this doesn't work out with Freddie and they go out and they make a big monster trade for a goalie. I don't know what the market's like now that John Gibson's gone. He was kind of the big fish. So we'll see what happens. But the Canes, they do look better. I will give them that. They do look better. I worry about losing Burns and Orlov on the back end, but if this Nikishin comes even as 60% as advertised, I think they're going to be just fine. I think Sean Walker is a guy that you're going to be able to rely on. Jalen Chatfield, again, another guy you can rely on. Mike Riley's obviously the 7th D there. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but I think Jacob Slavin and K'Andre Miller are going to be logging a lot of minutes this year, unless Nikishin really is that guy they want him to be. But I don't know. Maybe this is the year too, and this could be the year that Kochetkov takes over the reins as the starter, and you get Freddie Anderson on a cheap enough deal at $2.75 per year. Maybe he is the backup now, and that's all they're using him for. But again, even with Kochetkov, I do think the right move is to make him the starter now and see if he can handle it. But I just think the sample size with Freddie, it was so much so that you should have gone out and looked for anything else, because if this doesn't work with Kochetkov, you kind of already know it doesn't work with Anderson. And so I don't like that. But you know what? I have to give credit where credit's due. Again, the Hurricanes do come out of this free agency, I think, better than they were last year. I feel like they're more of a threat to score now. I think they can adjust their team to kill penalties even better now. I don't know. The goaltending just worries me. But again, the team is better, and that's important. No matter how you look at it, this Canes team did get much better. They still have $10.5 million in cap space. They could go out at the deadline and make a splash and bring in a huge name. Again, we have a pretty big for potential free agent class for next season. Now, a lot of these guys are probably going to extend on their deals, but like the Hurricanes, actually, now that I look at this too, I can't believe they didn't throw an offer sheet at Marco Rossi. I really can't. Now, maybe it's a draft capital issue. I didn't look at what picks they have available, but and this is kind of one where I'm surprised this wasn't a team with all of this cap space that they didn't go after a guy like Rossi or just even any of the other big free agent names too. So, but nonetheless, they did get better. There's no doubt about that. So I want to give credit where credit's due. Eric Tulsky managed the cap masterfully so far this offseason, and I can't hate on the guy that's got his team looking this lethal and still has $10.5 million in space. But man, do they need a bona fide number one, without a doubt, goalie. So we'll see. All right. Let's move on here. Just trying to keep track of all my notes. Let's go to the Islanders. So the Islanders, obviously, they had the Dobson trade last week. Now they get Alexander Romanov. They get his deal done. He's locked up 8 years, $6.25 million per year. Again, another guy who is a premier young player. 25 years old. He's probably just entering his prime. And yeah, do they wish they could have kept Dobson? Obviously. But you look at their back end. Again, Romanov extended there now. Pulak and Pelech are still there. They're both 30 years old, and you still got them for the next 4 years. Scott Mayfield, a little bit on the older side, but again, another guy you can slot in your lineup every night, 32 years old. This isn't a bad club. If Ilya Sorokin can be healthy and be himself next season, it's weird how many people I've seen just kind of forget this guy even exists. It's crazy to me. But if he's on his game, Ilya Sorokin's one of the best goalies on the planet. So it's not perfect on the island right now, but again, you keep most of your strong D-core together. Obviously, losing Dobson is a killer. It is. There's no way around it. It does suck. But you have one of the best goalies on the planet if he's on top of his game. And you look at them up front, and that's kind of where my concern is. They bring in Drouin as well, 2 years, $4 million a year. I didn't write that down, but I just remember it now looking at their Puckpedia page. Emil Heineman, who again was brought in as part of that Dobson trade, is a forward, not a defender like my stupid ass said he was. It's still a somewhat flawed lineup. I'm not crazy about Bo Horvat's deal. But again, he can be effective too. Matthew Barzal, obviously in his prime right now. This is a guy that's got to have. Barzal's got to have like 100-point season this year. I mean, he's got to earn his keep. He's their best forward, and he needs to play like it this season. And he's just got to have a big year. That Pierre Engvall deal still sucks. That it doesn't matter what anybody says. It doesn't make any sense to have a guy like him there that long. Obviously, they lose Matt Martin to retirement. Their big, scary, beat you up line of Cizikas, Martin, and Clutterbuck is now just down to Casey Cizikas, who's 34. So we are kind of in a transitional stage for the Islanders, and there's going to be some growing pains here. Again, I like the back end, the forward, and the goalie, obviously, but the forward core. Now, the big one for the Islanders is you bring in Matthew Schaefer, which I buried the lead on this too. I kind of had my notes for the Islanders out of order. With Schaefer coming in now, that back end is going to have a chance to grow more, but I'm still a little skeptical even with the number one overall pick because you don't know what you're going to get until it hits the ice. And so that's my only cause for concern. It seems like Schaefer's up to the task. I don't think there's going to be any issues here. He'll probably be playing top pairing minutes with Romanov, I would think, most nights. But it's just tough to say. Until he hits the ice, you don't want to just lock it in as a guarantee because that's how you get your hopes up and you get hurt. But again, you look at the Islanders forward core. Bo Horvat, again, not the best deal with all that money, and he's on a no trade for the length of this contract. JG Pajot's in the last year of his deal. Anders Lee, I have to imagine, is thinking about retirement pretty soon. He's in the last year of his deal at 35 years old. Kyle Palmieri, another one where you're like, There's a lot of players on the Islanders that makes me somewhat skeptical. But with how good Ilya Sorokin is, and again, he's still in his prime, and the potential for this D-core, again, it'll be such a wild card with Schaefer. But even if Schaefer's not great year one, there's still enough with this D-core where I believe that they're going to have a chance to win every night. Just because of how effective the D-core can be at shutting you down, how effective it can be. Not saying it will, but this is a group where they can shut guys down, especially if Sorokin's feeling it. This is a group that's going to be tough to score against, but I just worry about their inability to score. That's going to be the big killer for them. So we'll see what happens. Again, maybe it all works out, and Schaefer is a Calder finalist, Norris finalist, and the Islanders, have one of the best defenses in the league, and so a subpar offense may be enough to get them into the postseason. But again, they don't have a lot of wiggle room on the cap, and even if they did, there's still so much that I think needs to be addressed with the forwards that while I think you could probably see them in the playoffs this year, I don't believe that they're going to do any kind of damage if they get there. So we'll see. Time will tell, but there's still too much room for improvement with the Isles where I'm comfortable saying that they've gotten better enough to the point where they should be a contender this year. And that's not to say it's a big deal. I mean, with some of these deals coming off the books, they could go nuts in free agency next year and instantly catapult themselves to being one of the best teams in the league. So I don't want to just write them off as if they're dead in the water. All right, so let's move on. Martin Fehérváry extending with the Capitals. So this is a pretty good deal for the Caps. The Caps obviously had a really good year. I think more so than anybody could have fucking imagined, with Ovi breaking the goals record and them making the playoffs in general was kind of crazy. So this is an exciting time for Capitals fans, I would imagine. It's all about how you handle the pressure going forward. Now, as we know, this is almost certainly Alex Ovechkin's final year in the NHL. It's one of the worst kept secrets. There was that email that wasn't true that came out a while back that said, "Oh, this is Ovi's last year playing in the NHL." While that wasn't confirmed, or while it hasn't been confirmed yet, it seems like it's pretty obvious that this is it for Ovi. So the Caps, with that in mind, and probably knowing that since probably last year even, they probably knew that this is it for Ovi. The Caps are in that era of their organization where they're trying to smoothly transition to the next wave of young talent as they can. And obviously, like towards the end of this year, they brought in Ryan Leonard, who, if he holds up his end of the bargain with how good he can be, he's going to be a great scoring threat for years to come. But the Caps, again, Ovi on his last year. Now, Dubois, who was on this big deal, it's a big, long, expensive deal, turned out to be a really good season. Tom Wilson, and while he's probably making a little more than I'd like in an exploding cap era like this, not a big deal. He's still obviously very effective. Dylan Strome had a good season. Alexi Protas on $3.3 million a year is a killer deal for the next 4 seasons. That deal is going to just age like a fine wine. He's going to be a problem for years to come. Nick Dowd's got a couple of years left. I know he just extended there. Again, another guy who can play every day, even at 35, can be effective enough in a bottom 6 role, 4th line role. Anthony Beauvillier kind of had a resurgence there last year. He's going to be there a couple more years, $2.75 million a year. So Beauvillier, again, another guy that I feel like can help them transition into that next era of Caps hockey, where when the Caps really become a real problem again in a couple of years, he's going to be a guy who's at the tail end of his career, and he can be the old gray beard trying to get his cup too. So we'll see how it goes. Connor McMichael, again, making 2.1 a year. He's an RFA after this season. That could go either way. I mean, this is one where as a young center, he's got a chance to make a name for himself. Can he be a shutdown guy? Can he be a good power play guy? This has to be a season for him to find his true identity in this league and fix himself as a permanent part of this team. So we'll see. And then obviously there's a couple depth guys there. You think of like the Brandon Duhaime, Sonny Milano, guys that are just roster fillers at this point. You look at the back end, Jacob Chychrun, obviously that deal has been great for them to keep Jake Chychrun there. He slotted in perfectly. Matt Roy, another guy who's perfect fit there. Rasmus Sandin, that contract can only get better with age. I feel like I still feel like there's another gear for this young kid. Trevor Van Riem's, like, it's crazy that he's 33 already. It feels like just yesterday he was a kid. Is still there. 1 more year left. But again, we get to this next wave of Capitals, and Martin Fehérváry, who's been there I want to say he's been there since their Stanley Cup run, or either that or it was just after that he came into the league. I remember coming into the league at a pretty young age, but again, 25 years old, and he's going to be there until 2033. So this guy could be again a part of the next big Caps team. Declan Chisholm signs there, cheap deal, $1.6 million a year for 2 years. He'll be another guy that at his best can slot into the top six on some nights and give you good solid minutes. And you know what? At his worst, he can plug in and he can plug and play when guys go down with injury. So I watched him in Minnesota. I was kind of bummed that he left. Not the end of the world, obviously, but again, kind of bummed that he left because he was just I felt like a solid, reliable guy where if you needed to drop somebody in the lineup because of an injury, you knew you were going to get his best effort. So Caps fans, I think, can at least look forward to that. But again, the Caps are in a pretty decent spot. A lot of it's going to come down to how they've drafted and developed the last few years, because these older guys are going to start quickly kind of going away. Obviously the big one's going to be Ovi after this year. But with Faravari, again, as the Caps look to usher in this new era, having guys locked up long-term on cheap deals in an era where this cap, like I've said a million times, is going skyrocketing. I mean, these deals are going to look like absolute sweetheart deals, especially 4 or 5 years from now. So good on the Caps as they continue to handle these kind of what potentially could be bumpy waters. They've handled this quite well, and they still have over $4 million in cap space if they need a tinker, or if they have bad injury luck this year and they need to go out and get a guy. They have room. It's not perfect, but they've left themselves some rooms. And in the goaltending with Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren, I love this pair. I thought they were great last year. I thought Logan Thompson had an incredible season. I was sad to see again that it fell apart in front of them in the playoffs, but I think they have a chance to do some damage again this year. And I would love to see Ovi get one more deep playoff run before he rides off into the sunset. So we'll see what happens for the Caps, but I think this is another situation of a team that's getting a little bit better by the day. And I'd love to see what a full season of Ryan Leonard looks like too. I'm really excited for this kid. So we'll see what happens. Let's go over to the New York Rangers. Let's do that. Let's do the Rangers. That'll be fun. So Vlad Gavrikov signs in New York. One of the worst kept secrets too, where it just felt like it was never going to last in LA long term. Felt like he wanted out. Seemed like he wanted to go to the Rangers, and now he does. He's there for the next 7 years and $7 million per year. Pretty good deal. Gavrikov is 29 years old, so the last few years of this deal will seem like a lot of money, but with the direction the Caps going again, it's not going to be the end of the world. The Rangers need to win here. This is probably Artemi Panarin's last year in New York. I would be stunned if he extends there. It's the early rumblings. It seems like he's going to be on his way out of town. The Rangers, who had one of the oldest teams in the league, are doing a pretty good job of transitioning and bringing in that next wave of younger players to try and, build a contender again. But Igor's 29 too. Like, you still got to win while you have, or you still got to try and win while you have an elite level talent like Panarin. And Zibanejad's making so much money. I can't believe that deal. He's there till 2030 making 8.5, and he's already 32. JT Miller, there's a lot of flaws in this Rangers lineup, and that's my biggest concern with them. But we'll see what Scott Morrow can do as well too. Obviously coming over from Carolina, that could work out very well for them. Losing K'Andre Miller is going to suck. But with Adam Fox still there and Vlad Gavrikov there and Will Borgen there and even Carson Soucy, another guy who's on the right nights can be a good guy. I mean, he can play top 4 minutes. He can do it. So we'll see. Euro Vakanainen, that's another guy where it seems like, God, I remember when he was a Bruins draft pick forever ago. They were really high on this kid, and now he's just kind of jumping around the NHL. There's opportunities here for this Rangers group to do well. But it's going to be a by committee thing, because there's not one player on the roster where I look at, other than Igor, there's not one player on this roster I look at and go, that's the guy that's going to carry them to the promised land, because they don't have that guy. And I think that's the biggest thing that hurts them. Panarin's probably the closest thing they have to it, and he's already 33. So I don't know. And not to say 33 is a gray beard old guy. That's not what I mean. But the fact that your only guy that is really that quote unquote superstar like talent is on an expiring deal, and he's 33. It's not like he's 27 and he's primed, and he's entering his prime. Like, wow, this could be our guy. No, this is a guy where he was that guy the last several years, and you didn't get over the hump. So that's kind of my concern with the Rangers is, yes, they're doing a good job bringing in the next wave of young talent as well, but I don't know, man. I worry that this Rangers build, the timing of everything has just not gone their way, and they don't even have $1 million in cap space. Barring something miraculous, I really don't think the Rangers are as close as they want to be to winning that next Stanley Cup. All right, so we got the Rangers done. Let's move on. Actually, you know what? Let's take a break real quick because I could use some water because I think it feels like I've been rubbing sandpaper on my throat. All this nonstop talking. We're going to take a break real quick. We'll listen to what Xenopucks has to say to us, and we'll come back and we will get through the rest of the show, which will include a Blue Jackets corner that I'm saving for the very end for all our Blue Jacket listeners. So we'll do that. We'll take our break and we'll come back and we'll rattle off the rest of these and see if I can survive. This is the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast.
It's hockey season, and you're looking to work on your stick handling or maybe even your shot, but ice time just isn't an option for you right now. Luckily, our buddies over at Xenopucks have got you covered. They've developed an elite off-ice practice puck that, in addition to looking like the real thing, is the same size and weight as a regulation hockey puck to give you that authentic feel on the end of your stick. It works better than other off-ice practice pucks on almost any surface, whether you use it on hardwood, carpet, concrete, or even asphalt. Xenopucks glide like a real puck on ice. So if you're looking to improve your game without setting foot on the ice, head over to www.xenopucks.com and get yourself a puck. Check out their merch selection and be sure to follow them on Instagram at Xenopucks.
All right, and we are back. So thanks again, as always, to Xenopucks for sponsoring our show. We love working with them. Eventually, we're going to have to get those guys on this podcast. We've said it 1,000 times that we need to get them on here, and I think we're pretty well past the point where we should have already had them on. So we'll have to figure out how to address that this offseason so we can get them on ASAP to start next season. All right, let's head out west. California, the Anaheim Ducks. So the Ducks, who still have the most cap space in the league, if I read this right. Yeah, Ducks still have the most cap space in the league. They have just under $29 million in cap space, which is hilarious. Right now, they're in arbitration with Lucas Dostal. Eventually, this will get worked out. Obviously, the Ducks will, even if worse comes to worse, will pay whatever they must to keep him there because he is one of the best young goalies in the league. And if they have any chances of being competitive, it's not going to be on the backs of Ville Husso and Peter Mrazek, they got in the John Gibson trade. So here we are. This is where the Ducks sit. They bring in Coach Q. They bring over Mikhail Granlund. They bring in Chris Kreider. Alex Killorn's been there for a little bit. On the back end, obviously, they brought in Trouba as well last season. Was that the start of last season? Was that the year before? It's hard to keep track now. This roster's far from perfect, but it is significantly better than what it's been the last few years. The big deal, obviously, is that they've moved out Trevor Zegras and when they brought in Ryan Poehling. So worth mentioning at least that it'll be kind of weird that Zegras isn't there, but unfortunately with his injuries and the lack of production, I don't think it'll affect them too much one way or the other. I do think on the other side of the coin is that Zegras has a potential to flourish in Philly under a really good coach in Tocchet and just a new refined system that they're going to have over there. But for the Ducks, Leo Carlsson is still so young. Cutter Gauthier is still so young. They both are showing a lot of promise. So while this isn't the sexiest roster, this is a roster of a bunch of old guys who know how to play with, and it's going to be the other half of it's going to be guys who are so young. They've only been in the league a couple of years. So we'll see. It seems like the hope is that on the back end that Pavel Mintyukov and Olen Zellweger are going to be, household names before too long, which they need to be because you look at a guy like Gudas, who's, I can't believe he's still in the league. And if the Ducks weren't a team, I don't think this guy's even got a job. But Trouba as well, last year of his deal, I assume he probably extends there. I don't see a reason for him to want to leave. With this next wave of talent coming in, he's not an old fart. He has the chance to stick around and be a part of this Ducks team when it is competitive and one of the best teams in the league. I just mentioned this with the Rangers. There's not that one name right now where you're like, that's the sexy name. That's going to be the guy that brings us to the promised land. There's hope for that. Jackson Lacombe is still very young and could be good. Minchikov and Zellweger, I just mentioned, guys who have the chance. Lucas Dostal, again, is still, I think, has another gear that he hasn't found, and he's already good. There is some good talent here. And Troy Terry, again, he's just entering his prime. He's only 27. But there's just not, in Mason McTavish too, who they got to get a deal figured out with him. Like that's vital. That's part of the reason you move on from a guy like Zegras is because you got Mason McTavish and Leo Carlson and Cutter Gauthier in your back pocket where you got to get these guys on deals. There's not that player yet with Anaheim where that you're like, that's that one guy, that's the guy. But I don't think they're that far away either. I do see one of these young stars budding and emerging into this household name that everybody's like, oh, we don't want to play them this night and have to deal with this guy. So we'll see. The Ducks have a lot of room to work. They can make trades throughout the season, or you know what, if they don't want to, they can hold on to all this money. I think they're above the cap floor now. Let's see. Nope, actually they are still below the cap floor or the salary floor. So they're going to have to bring in some names. It's just a matter of what. But again, they're going to extend Dostal. They're going to extend McTavish. And that'll probably put them over the cap by itself. But if not, again, they let Robbie Fabry and Brock McGinn walk to free agency. You could always reach back out to those guys, bring them back. Oliver Shillington on the back end, another guy where you're like, yeah, you could probably bring him back too. I don't think any of those guys were injury issues. Brock McGinn says it was a month to month, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Ducks. They got plenty of room to finagle. And I envision a lot of these young guys getting big extensions in the not too distant future. So their salary issues will be mostly resolved by the fact that all their young stars are going to be on expiring RFA deals. But again, next offseason, they're going to have just as much room to go after a big name, and next season's free agent class could be a big one. So we'll see what happens. But I'm not too worried about the Ducks. Again, it's not going to be a year where there will be a lot to make the playoffs. But now that they have a really good coach, I think the expectation is that the rebuild accelerates exponentially and that this team starts to get really good really quickly. So I'm excited for the Ducks. But again, I do want to see one of these young talents they have, and it doesn't matter who it is, but you need one or even ideally two of these guys to really step up. I think the eyes are in Anaheim are going to be all on Leo Carlson and Cutter Gauthier and Pavel Minchikov this season to take that next step and elevate themselves to an elite level where they can, for God's sake, get Troy Terry some help. So we'll see. I'm excited for the Ducks, but we're still a long way away from the promised land for them. All right, let's go over to New Jersey, back across to the East Coast. So the Devils, they bring in Connor Brown, 4 years, $3 million a year. Not a terrible deal for Connor Brown. Obviously, part of both of these Oilers teams that went to the Stanley Cup final. But it's obviously he wasn't able to work out a deal with the Oilers, so he comes over to Jersey. And Jersey, a team where that Jack Hughes injury last year just fucking killed them. And then Luke Hughes going down with an injury just fucking killed them. And Nico Hischier being injured was an issue that they dealt with. And so a lot of guys that Kovacevic, I think, was another guy too on the back end. Wasn't he out with an injury? It's hard to keep track. The Devils got eaten alive by injuries last year. And so I think a lot of the flack that this team catches was mostly due to the fact that they were so banged up that they just never looked like they had a chance and that they shouldn't have even been in the playoffs. So that's not really the case. Also, the Devils extend Jake Allen 5 years, $1.8 million a year. That's a great deal. You have your backup. You have your backup goalie. I don't know why I was going to say backup catcher. I was thinking baseball. You have your backup goalie locked up for the next 5 years. And yeah, Markstrom's on the last year of his deal and he is 35. But Devils are going to have a little bit of money going into next offseason, most likely. With Markstrom being off the books, they're going to be able to go out and find a goalie if they need to. At least be able to have a 1A, 1B if you need to run that until you can find your next stud goalie. But you look at their core group. Okay, Timo Meier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, all locked up for a long time, all till at least 2030. Nico Hischier, and here's the ages of these guys. I mean, Timo Meier, 28, Jack Hughes, 24, Jesper Bratt, 26, Nico Hischier, 26, Dawson Mercer, 23. Like you have a lot of great young talent. That's really young. I mean, Jack Hughes only being 24. That's a nightmare for teams in that division, I would imagine. But you look at the back end, Brett Pesce's only 30, Jonathan Kovacevic is only 27, Jonas Siegenthaler is only 28, Luke Hughes is only 21, Simone Nemec 21, Seamus Casey 21. Like, these Devils are going to be a dog within the next couple of years. They're already a very good team, in my opinion. They're just not a team you can sleep on. Again, they bring in Connor Brown too, who's only 31. I thought he was a little bit older, but they bring in Cody Glass as well, bring in Evgeny Dodonov. Like every addition they make to this team is a player where I'm like, that's a fit. That's a good fit. Like, even they're not the sexiest names, but they don't need to be because they kind of already had those. You look at, I just mentioned this with a couple of teams that the teams like the Rangers and the Ducks, they don't have that one guy where you're like, wow, this guy is legit. The Devils have like 4 of those guys. Nico Hischier is a great center. Jack Hughes is an elite scorer. Luke Hughes is going to be one of the best defensemen in this league. Dawson Mercer is a great player. Jesper Bratt is a firecracker. That guy's a pain in the ass to play against. Timo Meier, when he's on his game, is an excellent player. They have so many good players. Their only old guy really is Brendan Dillon, who's 34, and I don't think all of them, the goalies too. Goalies are older, but as far as their forward and D-cores, I mean, their old guy is Brendan Dillon, who's not even the most integral part of their roster. And he's, he's defenseman number 6, more than likely, or 7, honestly, if Seamus Casey plays as well as, and Simon Nemec can play as well as they're capable. I mean, Brendan Dillon might be your 7th guy, but we'll see. The Devils do have 4 right-handed shooting D-men, so I would imagine not all of them get in the lineup, so we'll see, or maybe they do and they play one on their offside. But the Devils have 5 right-handed shooting defensemen. Okay, so they got a lot of guys that shoot right over in Jersey, which that's a good problem to have. It is a good problem to have, but you need to have more than Luke Hughes and Jonas Siegenthaler as far as left shooting D. I mean, Brendan Dillon is one as well, but you can't play all these guys unless you're on 11-7. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 right shooting D. Crazy. And yes, Luke Hughes is technically an RFA right now. Obviously, that deal will get done one way or the other. Well, it's just about finding the right number, but no chance in hell he's not signing in Jersey. So the Devils do have about $7 million in cap space. I would imagine Luke Hughes is going to eat up most of that once he gets his deal done. But I would imagine we're not too far from that. And then again, with Markstrom coming off the books after this season and the cap going up, it's really hard to not see a bright future for the Devils. They have a lot of crucial parts of their lineup already spoken for the next 7-8 years. And really for the next 4 or 5 years, these guys are going to be probably as good as they'll ever be talent-wise. Like Jack Hughes is going to be one of the best players in the league for probably the next 10 years. And it's just all about tweaking to find that happy medium of talent, physicality, shutdown play, and goaltending. And I think the goaltending will be the only area where they have questions, just because Jake Markstrom's future is uncertain. If he doesn't stay there, can they bring in a guy who can be the mainstay in that? That's probably the only quote unquote flaw I could find with this team. I think as fast and skilled as they are, I would like to see a little more of a physical brand of hockey from them, but that's not really their MO, although Pesci played all those years in Carolina under that system. So they have guys that can do it. It's just all about execution. But I just really see I think the Devils are really a move or two away from being one of the best, like the best team in the league. They are just that good, but it's going to come down to, can they find the guys that can play in the playoffs too and bring that nasty physical brand that we've seen from previous cup winners like Florida the last 2 years in Vegas. You need guys that can just beat the snot out of you too. So the Devils have all the scoring and skill talent. It's all about, can they bring that, find that next level and bring that physical brand of hockey that they're going to need. But definitely a team where I would not sleep on them at all the next 3-4 seasons. Any of the next 3-4 seasons, I wouldn't sleep on them, because I mean, I think they're a sleeping giant. I really do. I don't talk about the Devils a lot on this show, but man, are they really a sleeping giant. All right, let's go back across to the Pacific Ocean again, and then we'll stay out west for a little bit. Ryan Lindgren, 4 years, $4.5 million per year in Seattle. I don't know what the Kraken are. I don't think the Kraken know what they are. Ryan Lindgren's a good player, so the issue here, I don't think, is the player. I don't know what the hell the Kraken are attempting to do here. Half their roster is on expiring deals right now, and their lone bright spot, really, I don't want to say lone bright spot, but they're one of their biggest bright spots is Joey Daccord, who, yes, is on a sweetheart deal the next 5 years, but he's already 28. As far as Joey Daccord's age go, this should be the era of his career where he's backstopping a perennial contender. Instead, he's playing behind a team of middle six forwards. Matty Beniers, who is the quote-unquote superstar young talent there, still needs to find that next level and play at it. But then you look at the rest of their roster: Chandler Stevenson, middle six guy; Jaden Schwartz, middle six; Jared McCann, middle six; Jordan Eberle, he's the captain there. That blows my mind. Mason Marchment, middle six forward. Ellie Tolvanen shouldn't be middle six, is given what his career projections were, but he is. Freddie Gaudreau, the definition of a middle six forward, arguably a bottom six. Ty Cartier, who just extended there as well, middle six forward. And then Shane Wright, who needs to prove the doubters wrong this season. That's just what it is. And yeah, I don't know who Yanni Nyman is, or Johnny Nyman, but I'm just reading off their Puckpedia right now. But all those other guys I named, Capo Caco's an RFA. I don't even know if he's going to resign there. But all those other guys, except for Matty Beniers, none of those guys are top-line players. None of them. Jared McCann, maybe. But the rest of those guys, not a chance. They're back end. Vince Dunn, okay, pretty good, damn good defender. Brian Montour, pretty damn good defender. Adam Larson, I think his better years are probably all behind him, or his best years are all behind him. Jamie Alexiak, probably done with the organization after this year. Ryan Lindgren, again, good defenseman. Josh Mahura, not a bad defenseman either. So you have a really great goalie and then a bunch of guys with a somewhat solid defensive core. I don't know what the fuck the Kraken are doing here. I don't know what the goal is here. I don't follow the organization closely enough to know the direction they're trying to head right now. But on paper, this is a mess. I mean, the one good thing they have going their way is that a lot of these bum guys are all in the last years of their deal. So maybe they're just riding this out until all these guys expire and they can go get real NHL players. I don't know. And I don't want to discount the whole team by throwing all these guys and sewering the whole group. But I mean, come on, this is silly, and it's not to say that the expectation for them should have been the same as it was for Vegas with how well Vegas played when they came into the league. But even Chandler Stevenson, who I think is a good hockey player, again, he's a middle six guy. He's not a top-line player. I don't think he wasn't in Vegas even, and he was a good player, but what did he play third line there? So I don't know. I just have a lot of issues with the way this team's constructed. And again, maybe they wait for all these deals to fall off the books and all of a sudden they walk into free agency next year with $35 million in cap space. And maybe that's the plan. And if that's the plan, then maybe they are on the right track, because as it sits now, this roster is a disaster. And who knows? In 12 months time, again, we could be doing our free agency show next year and they could have blown it out of the water and all of a sudden Connor McDavid's there and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's going to happen, but they could go on and have huge free agency next year. Maybe they will, and maybe they'll prove me wrong and I'll look like a complete jackass. But this team, as it sits right now, is not good. And maybe the goal for them, too, is to tank to try and get Gavin McKenna. And I'll tell you what, that's a good way to turn a franchise around. But there's no guarantee. There's going to be a lot of really shitty teams in the league this year. And the way this Kraken roster is constructed, I could see them being one. Now, the saving grace of Kraken have is that Joey Decord's an elite goaltender. I would say he's elite. He still needs to continue to grow because he kind of broke into the league later than some goalies do. But there's an opportunity here for this kid to really step up and carry this team to the playoffs. Again, the other saving grace the Kraken have is that the defensive core doesn't suck. It's not great, but there's enough talent there where you could see a good season from Decord and a good season from the defenseman, and all of a sudden they're fighting for a wild card spot at the end. But if they rely on their scoring this year, they're cooked. I'll just leave it at that with the Kraken. So still some work to be done there, but you never know what somebody's thinking, and who knows, they could have all kinds of tricks up their sleeves. With all these deals expiring, they could shed all these contracts and free at the deadline next season, and all of a sudden they're getting a shit ton of draft capital that they can move for other players or draft good young talent, potentially draft first overall. You just never know. So we'll see. All right, let's go up the coast a little bit to Vancouver. So Thatcher Demko resigns with the Canucks, 3 years, $8.5 million per year. This was kind of seemed like one where I was convinced Demko was going. So it's kind of weird that he's staying there now. And Brock Besser, another guy who we were all convinced is going, signs there 7 years, $7.25 million a year. So it's the two guys that everybody assumed were a lock to leave Vancouver, stay there on pretty hefty deals. With Demko, the skill is not the issue. The contract matches his skill, but his health has been such a wild card. And when you consider the fact that Shelovs looks like he's ready to make the full-time jump to the NHL, it's kind of surprising to see this move. But you don't know. Demko's going to enter the final year of a $5 million per season contract this year. He doesn't have trade protection, so I guess the thought process for the Canucks may be, if this isn't going to be a long-term fit, we move him before the no move clause kicks in. But we'll see. As far as the forwards go, again, Besser extends there. He remains the team's second highest paid forward. He's at $7.25 million a year. The Canucks do have their core locked up, which is the one thing they have going their way. But the question is the core good enough? Again, Connor Garland's there for what I think is a very long time. But Quinn Hughes still has a couple of years left on this deal before he inevitably goes to New Jersey. Sorry, Canucks fans. I don't actually believe he will go to Jersey. I'm just being a smartass. I think he will stay ultimately. I just feel like with how big a move that is, I know he wants to play with his brothers, but I don't know, barring something catastrophic, I see him extending here with the Canucks. But for the time being, he is a Canuck, so let's look at them. So the back end, Quinn Hughes, Phil Hronek, Marcus Pettersson, all locked up. Tyler Myers, who is going to need to log some big minutes this year, is still locked up there. Derek Forbert's going to be able to slot in a bottom pairing role as well. P.O. Joseph just signed there as well, so another guy you can slot in when you have injury issues. The defenseman, Elias Pettersson, they have, being so young, he's going to get some looks this year, I would imagine, too. I think there's just going to be some shuffling on how they play that bottom pair all season long in Vancouver. It seems like the top four is probably a lock with Hughes and Hronek and then Pettersson and Myers, but I think that bottom pair, I think they're going to be able to try a couple different things and shuffle it around and see what they like throughout the season. And under a new coach as well, maybe that'll be exactly what they need, is to just have a few different looks for this group. The forwards, too, are no exception to this. Again, they bring in a guy like Evander Kane, who's on the last year of his deal. But forward Elias Pettersson did not have the season they would have liked him to have. He's got to have a huge year, making 11.6. He needs to have the best season of his career this year. They can't settle for any less. Brock Besser needs to, if he's staying there for that money, he needs to play well. He needs to not be injured. Jake DeBrusk needs to continue. I mean, he's only making 5.5, but he needs to continue to be an integral part of this lineup as well, because he's there for the next 6 years. So he's got to play like it matters. He just does. And the depth on this team isn't super sexy. Drew O'Connor, Teddy Bluger, Kiefer Sherwood, I think, just actually had the most hits in a season. So we'll set that aside because he's an effective player. But Niels Amon, who I've never even heard of, Linus Karlsson, Philip Hedel, can he stay healthy? There's just a lot of question marks for this team. And I don't think they have enough top six talent there. And unfortunately for the Canucks, they only have $795,000 in cap space. So they don't really have the room to do much. So barring a blockbuster trade, this is the group that they're going to try and run it with this year, which I think, if healthy, can make the playoffs. But are they going to be good enough to win it? It just, with things have really fallen apart in the last couple of years since that loss to the Oilers a couple playoffs ago. It's really kind of faded away quickly on the Canucks. It feels like they have three or four top end players, or five if you count Connor Garland, and then a bunch of guys. It doesn't feel great. And with Demko's health being uncertain, who knows what you're getting now. If Demko is fully healthy, plays the whole season, they're probably fine with how good that back end is going to be, and those top four guys sucking up all those minutes, they'll probably be fine. But if it's not, I mean, they could be looking at another year where they're a bottom 10 team in the league. Like, it could really blow up in their face that quickly. So we'll see. I mean, the Canucks only have 5 picks in next year's draft. They don't have their own third or seventh, which missing a seventh isn't a big deal, but it doesn't seem like there's a ton of help on the way. Now, I should have prefaced this by saying their minor league affiliate just won the Calder Cup. So you look at a guy like Atu Ratu or Roddy, or however the hell you say that. I've heard it pronounced both ways. He's a guy that probably is going to get some call-ups from the minors as well. But they don't wow you in any specific way. They don't. Yeah, Quinn Hughes is sick. I mean, he is. And Elias Pettersson, if he plays well, can be. But I just have a lot of uncertainty with the Canucks. Now, again, I want to say that if Demko's healthy and this defense core plays like we know it can, probably not the end of the world, probably a playoff team. But if they're fighting the injury bug all year and Elias Pettersson just can't score again, then they're cooked because I hate to accuse any team of being this, but they're really a one-line team on the up front. And other than having some world beaters on, just bonked my mic. Other than having some world beaters on defense, they really don't do anything especially well. So it's going to rely a lot on the goaltending, it seems like. So we'll see what happens with Vancouver. We're going to go back down the coastline, and then we'll move in towards Utah. Utah has made a couple of moves where I think that this turnaround for them is sooner than later. First of all, the start, their only free agent that they really need to re-sign is Jack McBain. He's an RFA right now. That's a guy where you want to get him locked up. He's a young player. He's a firecracker. He can be a pain in the ass to play against. It's not a super expensive deal, and with the Mammoth having essentially $11 million in cap space, that's a deal you got to get done sooner than later, and I'm sure they will. But let's look at it's weird to see. Puckpedia has JJ Peterka listed as John Jason Peterka. It's weird to see it written out like that. But yeah, Utah obviously makes the deal for Peterka. They bring him in. He's going to be a huge part of their lineup. He's still only 23, which is nuts. Over the last couple of days, the Mammoth brought in Nate Schmidt on the back end, 3 years, $3.5 million per year. That's a good deal, and a guy who just won the Stanley Cup and is probably feeling like $1 million. Obviously, Sergachev and Dursey there. If they can have a healthy season out of this back end, they're going to be nuts too. Oli Mata's still only 30. God, he broke into the league at such a young age. I just assumed he was almost 40. So Oli Mata's only 30. John Marino's 28. Sean Dursey's 26. Sergachev 37. They have a really pretty solid top four now, and then they bring in Nate Schmidt. And I'm not saying Oli Mata is the best defenseman in the league, but to only be 30 and he's only making 3.5, and Nate Schmidt's only making 3.5, you really can't complain. This is a pretty healthy amount of money they've got into these guys. It's not ridiculous. None of these contracts are a rip-off, and they're good deals for the player and the team. Karel Vejmelka, it seems like the hope there is that he's just going to be the number one guy. He's on a good deal for the next 5 years. He's only 29, so this is the kind of the era of his career where this is it for him. This is where he's going to go earn his keep and make a name for himself, or not make a name for himself. But to go back up front for this team again, JJ Peterka just comes over. He's making 7.7 a year for the next 5 years. Clayton Keller's making 7.1 for the next couple of years. Dylan Genther's making 7.1 until the end of time. Nick Schmaltz is in the last year of a $5.8 million deal, which kind of seems like a lot, but when he signed that when they were still in Arizona, it's like, well, for him, it's either like you pay me or I leave this shitty ass place. Well, now the Yotes have since become the Mammoth, and it's a lot better situation, but he's on the last year of his deal. I'm sure if he stays, it'll be at a little bit of a cheaper cap hit, but maybe not because the cap's going up. He might be able to stay right where he is. Lawson Krause, couple more years left on his deal. Alex Kerfoot's final year of his deal. Barrett Hayton is an RFA after this season. The Mammoth also bring over Brandon Tanev as well. That's going to be a great deal. That was a guy where I was bummed the Wild didn't get him. Just a pain in the ass, in your face, physical, fast. Every shift is 110% energy kind of player. So he is 33, but that's a guy who you're not looking for his scoring touch. You're looking for his physical brand of hockey. He's a tough guy to play against. So good signing for them at a cheap deal, low risk move. Kevin Stenlund still got a year there. Liam O'Brien, spicy tuna. He's still got a couple of years there. Logan Cooley's in the last year of his entry level deal, which he's a guy who's going to be due for a big payday as well pretty soon. The Mammoth don't strike me as this, again, a team where I'm like, this team could win the Stanley Cup, but it is very, very easy to believe that this team could be hunting for a playoff spot next year if they're healthy. You could argue that they would have probably been in one this year had they been healthy, but those injuries in the back end killed them. So I would keep an eye on Utah. They're not a team I would sleep on. Again, I don't expect them to make any kind of deep playoff runs, but they're a team that I could see locking up one of those wild card spots, or on a really good year, the number 3 spot in the division, and making a little bit of noise. I still think they're far from completing the puzzle, but you can see the path to success there. And they're not up against the cap either right now. So even after they re-sign McBain and extend Logan Cooley, like they're going to have a little bit of money to play with. So this is a team where the dark days of the Coyotes I think are finally behind them, and they're seeing what a light at the end of the tunnel even looks like, and much less getting closer and closer to the end of that god awful journey of misery. So good for them, good for the fans. That building they plan has been going, and it's been undergoing renovations too, so they're getting it more and more suitable for hockey. I think after, not this summer, but next summer, I think they're supposed to be done with all the in-arena renovations, so it'll look like a proper hockey facility. So exciting times ahead for them for sure. And the other big one for the Mammoth is that in the draft they go out and they get Caleb Desnoyers. So that's a player where, you know, it's a number 4 overall pick. That's probably a guy who's going to be part of your organization long term. We'll see what happens. They do have a lot of young talent in the system there, but again, until these guys make the NHL and make a splash, they're all just kind of wild cards. Like TJ Ginla too is another one where I'm like, okay, great. Like we know what the potential is there, but is he going to come up to the show and make a splash? Now he's going to be 19, I think, when the next season starts. So I wouldn't even worry. I think he's going to be a great part of this organization for years to come. But for the Mammoth, I think the suffering days of the Coyotes are done, and the fun times are finally closer than you might think. So good on the Mammoth. They've made a lot of really good moves, and while I still think again they're far from the finish line of getting that elusive championship and even elusive playoff berth, I think better days are truly close. So, all right, let's move on to Sharks. So the Sharks maybe a little bit further away, but at least they're, as we said all of last season, they're fun to watch. So that's at least exciting. The Sharks still have $24 million in cap space. Logan Couture, I believe, is retired, but I think for the sake of the team, he's not officially retiring. I think his contract's going on LTIR until it expires in a couple of years, and then he'll officially retire, because at his age, if he retires with the league, I think his cap, it goes against the Sharks salary cap. So I think what they're going to do probably, and not that they need to, because they're barely over the cap floor, right? Or they're barely over the salary floor right now. But if they want to go out and add more and more, or sign guys to expensive deals, if they need to, they can move Couture's contract to LTIR. But looking at the Sharks, they didn't qualify Noah Gregor, Klim Kostin, or Nikolai Kovalenko, so those guys are all UFAs. And then looking at the rest of their roster, again, Couture's done playing, but Toffoli, $6 million a year, Alex Winberg, $5 million a year, which expires after next season. Barclay Goodrow, $3.6 million a year. The salary numbers, as you've noticed, for all these players are not only not high, but they're so irrelevant because most of these guys are going to be gone before too long. The big names you're looking at there are Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, William Eklund, who Eklund just extended for 3 more years after this season because he's still on his entry-level deal, final year of that this year. But yeah, the salary numbers are almost like arbitrary. We're talking about non-important numbers. The entire Sharks back end, except for Dmitry Orlov, is all on expiring deals. I would imagine half these guys are a lot to be gone or be trade deadline fodder. The Sharks are still a long way away from success, but I can appreciate the fact that while they're building these young guys up, they're surrounding them with guys who have been around a while, can teach them how to be pros, can teach them how to carry themselves, and help them develop into the elite players that they're capable of being. But I love the fact that the Sharks aren't marrying long-term contracts to do this, because that's how so many teams that rebuild get themselves into trouble, is you start signing deals for way too long for guys that shouldn't be making it, and people write it off as, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. They're so far under the cap, and they're not going to be good this year anyways. But all of a sudden you have, all of a sudden Macklin Celebrini has a 95-point season, and Will Smith has an 80-point season, and William Eklund has an 80-point season. And all of a sudden these guys are going to be needing huge money. Now Eklund is extended as of right now, so it's not a big deal. But all of a sudden these guys have breakout years, and all of a sudden their cap number goes up by 10 million, 11 million, 12 million, and so on dollars. And all of a sudden those ugly contracts you get married to start to hurt. So the fact that the Sharks are staying away from this is good, but it's also very impressive. All of the contracts they have are so low risk that it literally doesn't matter. And again, as Celebrini and Smith and these guys that are working up through their system who aren't even in the NHL yet are continuing to grow and develop. The Sharks are leaving themselves just an absolute. It's just, I can't even put it into words. I mean, they're leaving themselves tens of millions of dollars in cap space. I mean, literally, this team, as it sits right now, if they don't extend any of these guys on expiring deals, I mean, this team's going to have like, it's something stupid, like almost $50 million in cap space next summer. I mean, this is a team where if Celebrini and Smith, like if these guys continue to get better and they have huge breakout years, this instantly becomes a destination. San Jose is a great area for the weather. I know taxes are high in California, but the weather's great in San Jose. The living's good over there. And if these young kids can make it an attractive destination for free agents, this is a team that's going to be able to spend whatever they want because they're going to have no money locked up in anybody. And the only players that have term are their guys on entry-level deals. So yes, the Sharks on paper suck. I get it. I like the moves adding Orlov into the mix. I like that they bring in Nick Leddy as well. Like there is some talent that they have on the roster. Toffoli is still a very good player, and again, Toffoli, another guy who has term anyway, so he's a guy that's sticking around. But other than that, all your best players are on entry level deals. So yeah, they might not be great, but it really doesn't matter. They're doing this rebuild, in my opinion. They're still doing it the right way. Their young star goalie Askarov, who they got from Nashville, still only making $2 million. And again, he's kind of on a prove it deal too. The next 2 years before he's an RFA, he's another one where it's just like, go earn your money. And you know what? If he does earn his money, the Sharks are going to have as much of it as they need to pay him. And so I think the Sharks are probably still looking at another season where they're potentially a bottom 5 team in the league. But with Gavin McKenna being the number one pick, the consensus number one pick next year, I don't think they're going to be too upset if they can bring a talent like that in. And again, you look at their farm system, and there's still a lot of good young names in there that they could bring up and potentially have great careers with. And they don't even have to go out and spend a lot of money on these guys. I mean, the Sharks, it's not perfect. It's not. There's a reason they finished like almost dead last this year, but there's just so much reason to be optimistic here. They're not married to ugly deals. Their budding young stars are fun to watch. So we'll see. I'm excited for the Sharks. It's just it's another situation where I don't want to speculate on where they can go with it because the whole roster is on expiring deals, so you just truly don't know. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You know your stars are going to stay there, and they're going to keep getting better, and you wait and see how Mike Grier fills in the gaps around them. So we'll see. This will be a quick one over in St. Louis. Nick Bjugstad signs over there 2 years, $1.75 million per year. It's a good move for the Blues. Good center, can fill in your lineup. I don't think the Blues necessarily are going to be a super dangerous team this year anyways. I mean, obviously they made the playoffs last year. Jordan Binnington, I thought, kind of had a rebound season for the most part. But the Blues, again, up against the salary cap too. The roster, again, like a couple other teams I mentioned, is lacking that one guy where you're like, this is the guy that's going to bring us to the promised land. Now, the one bright spot the Blues have is that Jimmy Snuggerud is now with the team. And I've been saying it since he was in college. I don't think people understand how good Jimmy Snuggerud is and how good he's going to be. This guy is going to be putting up 40, 45 goals in this league, no problem, once he gets going. And he's eventually, I think he's going to be one of those players where like that's one of the household names in the league. He's not obviously there yet, but I'm telling you, I watched this guy play college for the last several years, and this kid can fucking bring it. And so I think there's still a lot of flaws on the Blues roster. It's not an especially attractive team, all things considered, but it's still a good enough team to make the playoffs. And sometimes that's all you need to do is just make the playoffs. So we'll see what happens. But again, I think bringing in Bjugstad's a good move for the Blues. He provides you some depth. He can play wing, but he's a tough-nosed player and can be good in the face-off circle if you need a guy to take face-offs. They also bring in Pius Suter, which was, again, a kind of a contract I'm glad that my own team didn't get married into for $4 million. Just didn't feel like the value was there. But you know what? For the Blues, you got to ice a team, and they're doing that. So I think Blues fans want a little more out of Alexei Toropchenko this year. And we'll see what happens with Jordan Kyrou. That's the only one where I'm like, I don't know where this goes for them necessarily. it seems like it's not the match made in heaven that everybody thought it was. So we'll see if they do move on from him, but we'll see. It's not a bad hockey team. I should really have prefaced it by saying this team doesn't suck at all. They're not bad, but with the teams around them getting better and better, I just worry that is this enough? But you know what? They asked a competent roster. And again, I completely missed Jake Neighbors too. He's still so young, and another guy who is starting to come into his own a little bit as well. So maybe a guy that can help solidify this roster and in the future play top line minutes with Jimmy Snuggerud on his other wing. And if Robert Thomas continues to be a top level center, then maybe. But we'll see. The Blues still got some work to do, but I don't hate the moves they made. I do think they go into next season a little bit better than they were this year. And you know what? Sometimes that's all you can ask for. It's getting better is much better than the alternative. So I guess you can't be too upset if you're a Blues fan. Maybe they didn't make the big moves you want, but there wasn't a lot of the big, other than Marner, there wasn't a lot of the big names, and the Blues were never going to be able to afford Marner. So that was really never on the table. So you know what? If they can walk away from this at least knowing they got better, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, Morgan Frost over in Calgary. $4.375 million a year for the next 2 years for Morgan Frost. The Flames kind of surprised everyone this year, that late season push to almost make the playoffs. Obviously fizzled out at the end. But there is some good young talent there. Joel Farabee's there for a couple more years. Matt Coronado's now there until 2032. Yegor Sharangovich is still there for 5 more years. Jonathan Huberdeau, if he can play at an elite level, even though that's a pretty rough cap hit, is still there for a while. Kadri, it doesn't seem like anybody really knows for sure what's going on there, so I won't speculate. But again, Morgan Frost extends there. He's only 26. He's still got plenty of good years in the tank, so I'm excited to see what he can do there. The Flames still have $15.5 million in cap space. They got to get Connor Zary re-signed, and they got to figure out a deal for Dustin Wolf now so it doesn't drag out. And really for the Flames, unless the player doesn't want to extend, I think the Flames' best interest is to extend him now, because as Dustin Wolf plays, he's only going to get better. And quite frankly, I don't think it benefits the Flames to let this guy's contract negotiation drag out, because if you can extend him now and get him on a bridge deal, if he wants to bridge, get him for a couple $1 million now, because if you let him play this full season, this is a guy that's going to probably be asking for $9-10 million next offseason. So we'll see. And for the Flames, I think for the fans, that's a good thing. If he's asking for $10 million next season, that's good. That means he probably had a season where he was, again, an unreal goalie, and that's great. But for the team and the cap perspective, you're like, get this guy locked up now so we can get some good years out of him before he's taking up the money that he's earned. And not that that's a bad thing that he's earning the money, but for in a cap world, even though the cap's exploding, get your guy in now so you can get him cheap and have more years of him where you can afford an even cheaper cap it to bring in high talent players. Because not to be mean, but Calgary's not a destination spot to play. So make it attractive, have plenty of cap room, have the good young talent there that's not making a lot of money. So the guys who are already making a lot are interested in going there, or the guys who will inevitably bring in a lot of money are interested in signing there as free agents. The Flames are working on a new building and everything like that, but it's not going to open for a couple of years. But this is their chance now to build something that is an attractive place for a free agent to come to. Because right now it's not. The arena's a dump. The team, while it did have a good season, they got a great fan base. It's still not that attractive spot to come to. There's still not. And other than Dustin Wolf, there's no skater there where you're like, that's the number one guy. That's him. He's our guy. There's not. There's a lot of good players. There is. Kevin Baugh, again, I was kind of dumbfounded with that contract a little bit, but over the last week or so, it's eased in a little more to me. Mackenzie Weegar's making a shitload of money for a guy that's 31 and isn't a superstar defenseman, or even a star defenseman, really. He's just a good player. There's just not that superstar there. So with Dustin Wolf, I think it's important you get him locked up now. You start to make this look like an attractive place to play. Again, obviously working on that arena. There's just a lot of tweaking they have to do, but I think that as they continue to get better through the draft as well, obviously that Zane Parekh too, I can't wait to come up. And he's another one where it's like you're probably looking to him in the future to be that stud defenseman, stud player, household name. But nothing's guaranteed. And that's the big thing. Nothing is guaranteed. So the Flames, while there is a lot of pieces there to build a winner, having guys there like Joel Hanley isn't really helping anything. Rasmus Anderson is all but gone, which I think is a little concerning because he's a good defender, but I think it's also not a bad thing because you can bring in some serious talent for that guy. Yes, he's only making $4 million right now, which actually I think makes him a perfect rental if the Flames aren't in a playoff spot. But then you can go out and you can get a big name, you can get a big forward or prospect or whatever. The Flames, I think, are further away than maybe their fans would hope they are, but with a good goalie like Dustin Wolf, you'd be amazed how quick a franchise can make a quick turnaround. So as much as I want to kind of write them off because I still think they're a little farther than they want to be, having a wild card goalie like that in net is sometimes all you need. I mean, it was almost enough last year, if not for the Wild just finding a miraculous way to stay alive against the Ducks of all teams. I mean, the Flames would have been in the playoffs, so who knows? Let's go over to Dallas. Now, this will be fun and tough to do because I try to be objective when I talk about Dallas because I can't fucking stand them. But let's look into this from an objective standpoint. So we mentioned them a little bit earlier with the new coach coming in. The roster is good. There's no two ways around it. This is a good team, one of the best goalies in the world. They have 3 elite defenders and 2 of Miro Heiskanen only 25. That hurts my feelings. Thomas Harley's only 23. That also hurts my feelings. But Esa Lindell is there. They've leaned on him a lot too. He's very good, but he's 31, but still not a bad player. I've said it over and over again. The Stars' lack of total defensive depth hurts them. Now, this Leon Bichelle potentially could be a very good player going forward. So maybe they have their top 4 already, but in previous years, we've seen it fall apart after the top pairing for the Stars. It's been Heiskanen and then Lindell and then recently Thomas Harley. And then just whoever the fuck they throw in there. I didn't think even Chris Tanev in his short time there was as effective as he could have been. But he was still good, but it just felt like the Stars defense really imploded when Miro Heiskanen and Esa Lindell weren't out there. But you look up front at this team, Mikko Rantanen, superstar. Tyler Seguin, pretty good, probably making too much money. Roope Hintz, stud. Wyatt Johnson, stud. Jason Robertson, if he stays there, a great player, but they're already over the cap by $1.8 million. I think Robertson, especially since he has a no trade clause, is probably the odd man out there. The talk seems to be that the Stars don't have interest in moving him, but I'm like, okay, how do you ice a team that's cap compliant? Because I don't think they want to stuff any of these guys on LTIR. They extend Jamie Benn. They keep him there for another year. They extend Matt Duchene, keep him there for 4 more years. I think extending Duchene isn't a bad move because he's a good player. I think Jamie Benn, it's just about keeping your captain. I would have moved on from him, but I can appreciate a team wanted to keep a guy who's been there his entire career and is the captain. And you know what? You get him at $1 million, so it's a low risk move, and then you keep everybody happy. You keep the synergy in the locker room there. So I can understand the move from that point of view. So as much as I think there probably would have been time for them to move on from him, it's hard to argue with getting him at close to league minimum. So, and again, he's your captain, so you keep your room together like that. I get it. To me, it just seems like Robertson is the odd man out here, or Sagan, if you can find a way to move that contract, which Stars fans might not like to hear, but with guys like Hintz and Johnston coming up through the system, and if you want to keep Robertson, why don't you move on from Tyler Seguin if you can find a suitor for him, if you can get him to want to waive, which is the big thing too. I mean, if he doesn't, then you're married to the deal because it's a no move. But if you can't and you want to get better now, then you move on from Robertson. If not, you got to find a way to get back under the salary cap. But unfortunately for the Stars, because of this cap situation, if they don't move on from Robertson, they're going to be stuck in a position where they're having a guy like Matt Dumba and Ilya Lyubushkin lining up in their second defense pair every night with Tom. I would assume Thomas Harley is going to be probably playing second D pair minutes just to slot him behind Heiskanen to give them that depth. But their right shot defensemen are Matt Dumba, Ilya Lyubushkin, and Nils Lundqvist, and Alex Petrovic if he stays in the NHL. So none of these guys are good enough to be really playing top 4 minutes, but one of them is going to be doing it. And so for the Stars, unless they are willing to accept that they need to move on from Jason Robertson so they can get an actual top 4 defenseman to pair with Thomas Harley, they're going to be up against it because I think Matt Dumba and Lyubushkin especially are guys where you're really going to see the flaws in your team or in your defense core if those guys are playing 20 minutes a night. or 23 minutes a night, that's where you're going to start to have some issues. And I know firsthand from Dumba, when it gets away from him, it really gets away from him. And I don't want to dog on the guy. It's just the truth. But I think for the Stars, you don't want to move on from Robertson, but you want to maximize your value, because the other thing is he's an RFA after this season. And given that the cap's going up, he's probably going to ask for a pretty sizable raise, which not the end of the world in a rising cap era. But I don't know. It's tough waters to navigate. But the good thing for the Stars is Jim Nill is the GM, and he is an absolute magician when it comes to building a roster. So I don't want to count him out yet, because with the way he works, I wouldn't be surprised if he finds the way to ship out Matt Dumba and Ilya Lyubushkin and bring in one defenseman who's really good and can just suck up those second pair right side minutes. So overall, the Stars are just an outstanding team. As far as their ability to score, as far as their ability to play in the playoffs, obviously they haven't gotten over the hump, but they're skilled enough to do it. They just need to solidify that decor. The lone weak spot of this team, in my opinion, the lone weak spot of this team is that defense. That is the bottom half of that defense, because their top three guys are all elite, and Harley and Heiskanen are about as good as they come. So they're very close. They just need to solidify the rest of that decor and make it worthwhile, because I think the forwards are skilled enough to bring them to the promised land. And Ottinger, when he's at his best, we know is one of the best goalies in the league. So I think Dallas is very close here, but they got to figure out a way to address that defense, because that's going to keep holding them back every year. And now, granted, their loss in the playoffs this year was due to the scoring drying up, and I get that, but still, they got to address that defense. They just have to. That's going to be the thing that puts them over the hump. This team's good enough to win a Stanley Cup with the right defense. It just is. It's really well built. They bring back Radek Faksa, by the way. That's a good deal for them. Gets them some depth. Yeah, this is a team. They gotta take one more crack at this. But I think moving Robertson, who was mostly invisible in the playoffs and has had some issues scoring in the playoffs in the most important games. If you look at Robertson's stat lines in the playoffs, he largely has been invisible, and I think that's a guy they look to move on from. And that's not to say he's a bad player. He just hasn't executed in the big moments, and that's why I think they could fare really well if they can move out Robertson and one of these god-awful Dumba or Lyubushkin contracts and bring in a really solid, bona fide right shot defenseman. I think they have a chance to run all the way to the finals and win the whole thing. So we'll see how the Stars handle it. I trust Jim Nill will make the right moves. He almost always does. So we'll see where they end up in short order. Patrick Kane, we'll be real quick with this. 1 year, $3 million in Detroit. He's got opportunity to earn more with bonuses, but for Kane, he doesn't have to pick up his life and move it anywhere else. So he can just hang out in Detroit, continue to flourish there. He's played very well. He's obviously getting older, but Detroit's got a lot more on their plate that they need to worry about than just Patrick Kane. This is a team that is in a really rough spot right now. They're not, I don't want to pick on them because I want them to be good. I really do want them to be good. It's more fun when Hockey Town's in the playoffs, but look at that back end. Okay. It's Edvinsson who shows some promise, and Moritz Seider, who's one of the best defensemen in the league, and then it's a bunch of guys. You look at the forward group, it's Larkin, Raymond, DeBrincat, and Kane on most nights, and then it's a bunch of guys. And you look in net, and Cam Talbot is finally no longer the number one guy there in net. They finally bring in John Gibson, which is the thing that I think gives them some hope. They've been pretty close a few times over the last few years to making the playoffs, and every time it's like, boy, that goaltending, if it didn't suck, that might have been the difference this season. And you know what? I don't especially like this roster one way or the other. I really think that back end outside of Seider and Edvinsson is just not good. But with an elite goalie like John Gibson, and John Gibson has had some rough luck over the last few years, but the Ducks have just been so awful. The Wings haven't been great, but they haven't been awful. I think on this team, I think John Gibson pushes them into a playoff spot. And we'll have to revisit it when we do our preseason predictions for next season. But I just think there's enough talent there to drag them into a playoff spot. So we'll have to see how it shakes out when we do our preseason previews and who knows. But I really want the Red Wings to get back into the playoffs. So I'm finding myself having almost a biased look at this. Like, come on, you can do it. Like, just do it. Just do it. It's that easy. Just win the games. It's that simple. But the Wings, to their credit, have a ton of cap space right now. And I mean, Tyler Mott and Craig Smith are gone. they still show as UFAs in the Red Wings system, but they're gone. And so they don't owe anybody any money right now. And so I think that kind of works to their benefit. Ben Sherratt, Justin Hall, and Eric Gustafsson are all expired after this year, and I think they let them all walk to try and bring in some big names. So the Wings may be closer to the end of this rebuild than people might think, but this season specifically, it's a tough spot, and if they have another bad year and miss the playoffs, I worry that the organization makes a rash decision and unloads all of it, and I don't think they should, because I'm trying not to be biased because I want them to make the playoffs and be good, but with the amount of money they're going to have in this upcoming free agent class, even if you miss this year, you almost are like, just run it back one more time and then it'll work. I just don't want them to give up on this before they get to the finish line. And I mean, longtime Wings fans will know that. I mean, Steve Yzerman was there for a while before they won their Stanley Cups. And then after they won the first one, they just couldn't be stopped for the next 10, 12 years. So I think the organization, from an ownership standpoint, as the Ilitch family still owns the Red Wings, I think they understand that sometimes this can be a process, but when you're not getting playoff games, I can understand why that's frustrating. They started playing in this arena 8 years ago and still haven't hosted a playoff game. So I understand why they're like, oh my God, let's make the playoffs finally. But even if they don't this year, I'm like, you're going to have all that money with all these good players available. Please don't give up on this. So we'll see where the Wings go, but I'd like to believe that John Gibson's good enough to bring this team, which has been close enough to the playoffs the last few years. I'd like to think he's the final piece to at least get them back into the damn dance. So we'll see. Time will tell. All right, Claude Giroux signing in Ottawa. So he stays there. There was kind of talks. Does he stay? Does he go? Is he done playing? So on and so forth. Sens had a pretty good year last year. They, out of that grouping of the Wings, the Sabres, and the Senators, they were the first of that group of three to break through on their rebuild. And Sens have mostly, I would say, put themselves in a very good spot to compete going forward. You look at their core. Everybody's locked up for at least the next couple of years. I know David Perron's probably looking at the end of his career pretty soon. He expires this year unless he stays on a hometown discount. I don't imagine he's there too much longer, but their main core, Stützle, Tkachuk, Cousins, Batherson, Zetterlund, all those guys are there for at least the next couple of years. On the back end, Sanderson just signed a long-term deal, so he's going to be there for a long time. He's only 22, but Shabbat and Zub are there for a while. They just bring in Jordan Spence, which is a pretty low-risk move as well. I would like to see them get better on the defensive end. As they're another team where I kind of look at them like the Dallas Stars light, where they have a really solid forward group where I'm like, these guys could carry them to a deep run. And on the back end, they have three pretty damn good defensemen, and they have a really good goalie in Linus Ullmark. So to me, like I said, it's kind of like the light version of the Dallas Stars, where it's these guys, it's kind of a similar team build. It's just not as good as the Stars are. I mean, if you go guy for guy with the Stars lineup, it's a very similar construction in how they lean on their young guys, and they have a world-class goalie. It's just not as good as what the Stars are doing. But you know what, for Giroux, it's again, low-risk move for the team and for the player. Giroux gets to stay home. He doesn't have to pick up his life and move it anywhere else, just to stretch another couple seasons out of his career. So good on him. Lars Eller is going to be there for one more year as well. So we'll see how that goes. But I think the Sens will be a lock to make the playoffs again. They're a good team. Part of being a young group is getting into the playoffs and learning that sometimes you have to lose to learn how to win. And this year was huge for the growth of this team. And I think, to me, if I'm in ownership or management with the Sens, I'm like, that last season to me is evidence that we need to double down on this core and start to really, really build around them, because there's something here now. And for the longest time in Ottawa, that wasn't the case. I mean, there were some dark days after the Erik Karlsson era. So I think they're well past the other side of this now, and now it's all about finding the right pieces to solidify this team as one of the top threats in the East, because if anybody's going to knock Florida, it's going to have to be better than this. As good as the Sens are as a roster, I like what's on paper here. They need to juice up that defense if they're going to even have a chance against elite teams like Tampa and like the Panthers. And we don't know what we're going to see from the Leafs, but again, clearly this group wasn't able to get it done against the Leafs. So we'll see what happens. They are in a much better spot than they have been in previous years, but they still need to work to build that Stanley Cup contender. But I like what they're doing, and again, bringing back Giroux, it's a low risk move, and the guy gets to stay at home. So nothing to dislike about that. All right, Brent Burns, 1 year, $1 million in Colorado. So he just won't go away. It's cool to see that he's still going. Brent Burns is now officially the only active player in the National Hockey League who has played in a game that ended in a tie. So the last game that ended in a tie was 2004. And since then, when the NHL came back from the 04-05 lockout, they got rid of ties and brought in the much maligned shootout. But Brent Burns is, being an 03 draft class guy, the last active player in the league now to have played in a game that ended in a tie. I have to imagine this is probably it for him. Just one last hurrah with the team just because he can. And then he'll ride off into the sunset. So the Avalanche will get to, and when we do our preseason stuff, there's not much I have to talk about with them, but it is what it is. They're still a good team, but they're going to have to do some tweaking. Montreal resigns Jakub Dobeš, 2 years, $965,000 per year. Super low risk move for the Habs, who are continuing their build and getting better and better as well. Montembeault still seems like he's the number one guy there, but Dobeš late in the season last year showed some flashes of brilliance. So I think you give them a chance to run a 1A, 1B kind of system, in the Habs, who again are just continuing to get better by the day. I think this is a great move for the team and the player, and it gives Dobeš not only a bigger chance to prove himself, but again, if it works out well in these next couple of years, you have a good goalie on a really low cap hit. So I like this move for the Habs. I like the direction the organization is going. Right now, the Habs are over the cap, but I think they have some contracts that are headed to LTIR. Yeah, Carey Price's contract will get put to LTIR, and Carey Price's contract actually expires at the end of this coming season. So that'll be $10.5 million that they can freely spend wherever else they may need to going forward. The Habs also bring over Capo Kakin, and I didn't even put that in my notes, but I just noticed that he's there. So the Habs bring over Dobson, which I liked. I like that move a lot. I think with guys like Gouli there, and I still am pretty high on Carrier. I think he's a good defender, and he's not making a ton of money. And Jekai, I'm not crazy about him, but he's a fan favorite there, and he seems to be effective enough. Obviously, the big ones there, Lane Hudson, and if they can re-sign Jaden Struble. But Lane Hudson is going to be, him and Dobson are probably going to be that number one pair this season, and rightfully so. They're going to be. I think the Habs are actually, and looking at this team now, really going to be a good team this year. The core group of forwards are pretty good. It's not the most attractive roster, but Suzuki's an excellent hockey player. Cole Caulfield's an excellent player. This is a team that has a chance. I could see the Habs having like a top 5 power play with this group just because of the shots these guys all possess. Line A is a good power play weapon, even though I'm not that high on him as a player. But again, he's entering the last year of his deal. So it's like, again, kind of low risk. If he sucks this year, then you move on and you bring up your other young talents like Ivan Demidov, who I think before too long is going to be one of the best players in the league. Just the small sample size we got from him, I'm like, holy shit, this kid's a problem. So the Habs are probably going to be continuing to bring in that wave of the next young, great players that they've drafted, and they do have a pretty good farm system. We still haven't seen Reinbacher come over and do his thing. I do like that the Habs signed Mark Del Gaizo. I saw him play in Milwaukee and Nashville, and a guy that maybe under the right system can flourish a little more and play some NHL games. I know the Habs. I've heard Habs fans talk about Jacob Fowler as well. I haven't seen any of his game to see if I think he's any good or not. But this is a team that it's not unreasonable to think that they could be in one of these top 3 Atlantic spots. I mean, I could see them knocking off a team like a Tampa or Toronto to take one of those top 3 spots, and the Sens too. I should have said this with them. I think the Sens even more so, but the Habs. These good young players are such a wild card. I mean, Lane Hudson could have a 90-point season. Demidov could have a 45-goal season. You don't know what you're going to get from these guys, but on the ice, they've shown that they are elite players already at such a young age. So as much as I don't think the Habs have the best group of forwards, they're still very good, and there's no reason, and I don't want that to be confused with me thinking that they're a bad team, because I think this team is going to be one of the best young teams in the league this year. So we'll see. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in one of those top 3 Atlantic spots. I could see a Florida, Montreal, Ottawa, or a Florida, Tampa, Ottawa, or Florida, Tampa, Montreal, or so any combination of that. I don't think anyone's knocking Florida out of that mix, but we'll see. The Habs, it's not a perfect group by any stretch, but there's a lot of reason to be optimistic here. A lot of reason. And we'll see. They do have some money tied up in some spots where it's not great, but again, I think Brandon Gallagher probably makes too much, but he's a fan favorite. So you don't want to, I don't want to dog it too much on a guy that's an absolute vibe on the team. You know, Josh Anderson making 5.5. Not crazy about that either, but there's not really one deal on this team where I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like every contract on this team is either pretty good or it's great. So a lot of reason for optimism in Montreal, but not a super active free agency for them. But again, they really didn't need it just based on how things have been going. They really didn't need to be world beaters. And I don't even remember who they picked in the draft because they didn't pick super early this time around, but yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. We'll see what happens with the Habs going forward. All right, let's go to LA. So actually, let's take a break before we do LA because my throat's already dry and complaining about Ken Holland's only going to make it worse. So we'll take another break and then we'll come back. And this time when we come back, we will conclude the show because there's only a few things left in my notes. All right, and I'm back. Never needed a water break so bad in my life. So, okay. 3 things left we got to cover. 3 teams. We got the Kings, the Bruins, and the Blue Jackets. So let's start with the Kings. As I mentioned before break, Ken Holland went to LA, and I swear to God, he must have started doing meth the moment he arrived. There's no other way to put it. I don't understand really any of these contracts, and maybe somebody who is a little bit more involved with the Kings can break this down for me. I have a pretty good buddy that's a huge LA fan, and I haven't had the chance to talk to him about this yet, but Andrei Kuzmenko, 1 year, $4.3 million for the year. Corey Perry, 1 million, 3.5, or 1 year, $3.5 million for the season. Kind of overpays for both players, but they're 1 year deals, so you can't be upset. I still think it's a little ridiculous to give that much money out, but it is what it is. The issue I think that everyone is taking is the Cody Ceci deal and the Brian Dumoulin deal. Cody Ceci, who is not good, at 31 years old, signs 4 years, $4.5 million per year with a limited no trade clause, which is hilarious. Brian Dumoulin, who not bad, but just his best days are behind him. It is what it is. For 3 years, $4 million a year, again, modified no trade clause. I can understand with LA. First of all, they have a huge hole to fill with Gavrikov being gone. A huge hole to fill. I get it. Doughty's also 35. He's only got 2 years left. You got to bring in guys. You have to ice a team. It is what it is. But oh my God, this is rough. I mean, these are 2 terrible contracts for LA that they're going to be married to for a little bit. And LA, who, look, if I'm a Kings fan, these are the last years of Kopitar and Doughty. If I'm a Kings fan, I'm pissed that this is what we go out and spend $8.5 million on. You spend $8.5 million on these 2 crap players, and with the Kuzmenko and with the Perry deal, you're over $10 million in players that you could have spent on 1 good player or 2 pretty good players. Instead, you bring in 2 defenders. Cody Ceci is just simply not good at hockey. It just is what it is. But Brian Dumoulin, again, his best days are behind him. He had a lot of good years in Pittsburgh, and so I appreciate tossing a little bit of money at a guy who's proven himself in the past, and you can at least slide in the lineup. The Cody Ceci deal makes no sense, but you look at all of these deals put together, and you start to wonder what the fuck Ken Holland's doing. I thought he would go there and turn this team into a juggernaut. It was already a pretty good group. You look at guys like Kevin Fiala and Quentin Byfield, who's just getting better and better, and all the critics are quickly going away as this young man starts to flourish into a really great hockey player. Trevor Moore's 30 there, though. Like, there's a lot of guys on this team where I'm like, that's not impressive. But again, the last couple of years of Kopitar and Doughty, and this is what you do in free agency, I just think it's terrible. They still have $7 million in cap space. They could go out and make a move, but you still got to pay Alex Laferriere if he's going to be staying, which not that he's going to be taking a $7 million deal, but you have to figure out, you have to figure out where you're at with him, because you have to figure out who else you're bringing in to bolster this roster. Because as it's constructed, this Kings team is quickly looking for another date with a first round exit. It is. And you can argue even more so now. Now, granted, they bring in Perry, who's Mr. Get to the Stanley Cup Finals, but and I think, by the way, I said Perry's deal was $3.5 million. That is assuming he hits his performance bonuses. The actual cap hit is $2 million as it sits right now, but his bonuses are all games play bonuses, so he'll get $500,000 for playing at least 10 games, and then $250,000 for playing 20, 30, 40, and 50 games, which that's another $1.5 million right there. Assuming he plays at least 50 games, which puts him at 3.5. Plus, if LA makes it far into the playoffs, which I don't think we have to worry about right now, he can earn an additional, He can earn an additional $500,000 as well, depending how far they go in the playoffs. So we'll see. We shall see. But as it sits right now, this LA roster got worse. And again, losing a premier defender like Gavrikov, it does hurt. But wow, it's not impressive. It's not good. I don't know what Ken Holland was thinking. I think a lot of LA fans are right to be mad. I just don't know. I don't even know. I almost fell over when I saw that Cody Ceci contract. And I know the pickings on the market might have been slim in this class, but just because there's not a lot of guys to pick from, it's all the more reason to not go waste your money on a bad deal. Like, there's fewer guys to pick from, so your solution to that is to go sign a crappy player at too much money. Now, again, the cap's going up, and I get that, yes, but why waste almost $9 million that you don't have to? Nobody made you spend that. And so I don't want this to just be a sewer take on LA, but what else are you supposed to do? Not only did they not get better, they got considerably worse. And again, for a team who's looking at staring down the final couple of years, I mean, Anze Kopitar's in the final year of his deal, and he'll be 38 by the end of next season. So do with that info what you will. And Drew Doughty is, again, 35 and still a good defenseman, but he doesn't have a ton of time left. And this is how they're using these final years of two Hall of Fame, going to have their numbers retired one day players. Like, I don't know. It just bothers me to see LA going in this direction, because they're, especially towards the end of this year, it's like, oh wow, LA's really putting something together, and now it's just all blown up in their face. So kind of sucks, and I hate to see it, but it is what it is. Ken Holland's really put them in a tough spot now, so we'll see where they go. All right, the Bruins, the big bad Bruins. So they signed a bunch of guys, just a bunch of guys. They bring over Victor Arvidsson from Edmonton, as we mentioned. They signed Morgan Geekie to an extension, 6 years, $5.5 million per year. Kind of a lot of term and money for Morgan Geekie, but he did just have 30 goals this year on a team that was pretty damn bad. So I'd say a well-earned extension there for the most part. They re-signed Henry Jokiharju for 3 years, $3 million a year. Not a terrible deal. You do have to ice a roster, and yes, they're getting Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm back from injury this year. I'm thinking that they hope Mason Lohrei's deal, his extension gets him going too, and that Nikita Zadorov is worth the $5 million a year they're paying for him. So not all hope is lost for the Bruins, and Jeremy Swayman, again, a full season of him, I think will make all the difference. Just all that crap with the contract last year, I think it was doomed from the start last year for the Bruins. Johnny Beecher extends there 1 year, $900,000 a year. Not the player to this point that they were probably hoping they were going to get. I think they were going to be hoping he was going to be more of a second line, potential top line kind of guy when they drafted him. It's more panned out where he's been like a fourth line guy. So, again, low risk move though. He's not making a ton of money, and you got to ice a roster. I think they extended Murat Huznadinov as well. Not one that I left in my notes, but just one I'm observing now. They do get Fraser Minton from Toronto and the Brandon Carlo deal, which has a chance to age well for them because he projects to potentially be a very good NHL player. So that might work out well for them. But the big one up front, they had Tanner Jeannot, next 5 years, $3.4 million a season. This guy is like Lucic light. Bruins fans miss the days of prime Milan Lucic. That's the kind of hockey that Tanner Jeannot's supposed to bring. A big, physical, heavy hockey. He can fight. He's supposed to have a little bit of a scoring touch. Really hasn't had it though since his big year in Nashville. Since he went to Tampa Bay, it's really kind of blown up on him. But maybe the Bruins can revitalize this guy. He's in his prime. He's 28 years old. I think if you talked about the brand of hockey the Bruins and their fans like to see out of a player, Tanner Jeannot is kind of it. Big and heavy, and can open up space for skill guys like Pasternak to fill in the net. The Bruins don't have a super flawed roster. There's just, again, they have the same issue a lot of these teams have where they don't really have anybody that blows the doors off for you except David Pasternak. David Pasternak is definitely your elite level guy, and McAvoy is one of the premier defenders in the league. But outside of that, the team is, I would just say, good. It's good overall. Hampus Lindholm, again, is good defenseman. They have a couple of good players. Casey Middlestad is still pretty good. Pavel Zacha, it seems like they're up in the air on moving on from him. They brought back Sean Corrali, too, who was with them when they went to the Stanley Cup final. Like, there's a couple of pretty damn good players here, but it's not your father's Bruins where it was like with Bergeron and Marchand and Chara and, all those unbelievable Bruins teams and Krejci, just hell, even the year of Jerome McGinley there, like, there's a lot of good years of Bruins hockey, and this roster just looks so alien compared to how that was. But it's not a bad roster. I could see a route into the postseason for the Bruins this year. Health is going to be a big thing. Missing McAvoy and Lindholm and Hampus Lindholm is just not an option. Elias Lindholm needs to play like he's still in the NHL, because unless he was injured last year, I don't remember seeing his name at all. So we'll see. But yeah, I think a full season of Jeremy Swayman helps them. I think adding some more NHL quality pieces around David Pastrnak, again, will be enough to elevate this team back to being a contending team. And of course, the Bruins draft James Hagens as well, which that's gonna age very well. I think that's one where they're like, that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be a fun one. David Pastrnak right now, as it sits, is 29 years old. So by the time Hagens is ready to come into the league, Pastrnak will be in the back nine of his career. By the time Hagens is like elite, but I think that there's still a tough road ahead for the Bruins. I think they're going to have to get in the playoffs, potentially maybe a wild card spot. But again, it's not your father's Bruins. This is not the Bergeron Krejci era, and it's just weird to look at this team and not see those names there. But this team is not a bottom 10 team like they were this year. They're not. So I'll be interested to see where the Bruins end up. I still think they should have fired Don Sweeney. But Bruins fans, you're just going to have to be married to that. The Bruins also bring in Mikey Eyssimont, too, if I remember correctly. I have that in my notes. But I don't remember seeing him on the list here, so I don't know where he is. So we'll have to see where... Yeah, I swear to God, I had Eyssimont with the Bruins written down, but I don't see his name. Oh, here we go. Michael Eyssimont. Yeah, 2 years, $1.45 million a year. Okay, there he is. So he comes over from Tampa. Again, another guy you can drop into your roster and you're going to get minutes out of him, but not a world beater by any means. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Bruins. I do love the rebrand. I know I mentioned on the last pod the rebrand is sick. The logo, which blends the modern B with the old with the retro spoke styling, is a clean look, and the jerseys are unbelievable. So, if the Bruins suck this year, at least they'll look great in their uniforms. All right, let's end this with the Blue Jackets corner. So, I'm going to take a swig of water. I'm dying here. Over 2 hours into this. Blue Jackets corner, we'll try and run down this fairly quickly, but Dante Fabro extends 4 years, $4.125 million per year. Fabro, I thought, looked great with the Jackets last year. It felt like a good fit from the time he arrived. And it's a cheap deal, low risk. He's 27. He's in his prime. You're going to get his best. You're theoretically going to get statistically the best years of his career in this contract. So it's a good deal for the team. Zach Werenski is still only 27, which is nuts. And he's locked up for 3 more years. Provorov, they just extended. Damon Severson is making too much money, but he's there and on a no trade. So you're pretty well married to that deal. The Jackets. And Provorov's another extension too, 7 years, $8.5 million per year. That's a good deal for them. The player's a good player. It's a good fit for what they have. And again, I like that Don Waddell didn't do a Ken Holland, and there was garbage out in the market. So rather than signing the garbage, he's like, let's pay the guys that are already here, and I know what I'm getting. I like that route that he's gone with, that Don Waddell has gone with this Jackets roster in that aspect. The Jackets re-signed Owen Sillinger as well to a 2-way deal. That's $775,000 a year. So low risk for them too. Owen Sillinger's played great in the minors for Cleveland. And I don't think he's been out of place really when he's been called up to the show. So good low risk move for them too. And you keep a guy in your system that's been there. He knows the system. The team knows him. Like it's a good match. Don't get rid of something that you don't need to, especially when the market is this bad and Ken Holland's out here donating contracts. Unfortunately for the Monsters, I mentioned Owen Sillinger, but Trey Fix-Wolansky, who has never really been able to crack the NHL, but was a mainstay in Cleveland, a top scoring threat, one of the fastest guys I've ever seen. He heads to the New York Rangers, I think, on a 2-way deal as well. So potential there for him to crack the lineup and maybe make a name for himself. Again, I mentioned New York's got a lot of just guys that don't especially impress me. So maybe Fix-Wolansky goes over there and he's a guy that can maybe make a name for himself. We'll see. But I know those of us over here in Cleveland are going to miss him in the lineup. He's a firecracker. He's a huge scoring threat, and that'll be a tough one for that organization to fill the gap there. But congrats to him for being able to make that money still, get paid elsewhere. So, you know what, if it works out for him, great. You know, I don't have any ill will towards the guy. It just sucks that it didn't work out here. The Jackets on the forward end, they extend Dmitry Voronkov 2 years, $4.175 million per year for him. So Voronkov is, you know, part of that young group of Russians. I believe he was one of the ones dealing with injuries this year. So, I mean, the Jackets had all kind of injury problems this year anyways, but the team was pretty good this year. I mean, we're talking, it took Montreal going on that absolute heater for the Jackets to miss the playoffs. So it sucked that they did, but there's still a lot here to build on. This team is pretty well locked up. I wasn't over the moon about the Coyle and Miles Wood stuff. I'm happy they're here because they're good NHL players and neither of them makes a ton of money, but again, they weren't going to get Marner, and it's as much as I wanted him to go here. This would have been a great fit too, money wise, role wise. Like it would have been great, but you bring in guys that can ice a team, and I do think a guy like, even though we talk about guys that move the needle and make you a better team, and Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood are guys who are going to be able to slot into your bottom six every single night and give you good solid minutes, and they're not going to be a liability. And so while they're not the sexy, attractive, high scoring free agents that you want your team to always go get, they fill a need that the team had, and that was depth down the middle. They needed to be better down the middle. It couldn't just be Fantilli and Monahan. They needed some support, and they've got it now. And so Fantilli gets the support behind him. I think we see a little bit of a drop off in how much he's used in the defensive zone. I mean, not that he was Mr. Shutdown center last year, but I think having Coyle allows you to get Fantilli and get Monahan more starts in the O zone because you're not having to rely on putting your top line out when you're in your D zone because you're afraid you're going to get scored on. So I think the Jackets would like to see more out of Cole Sillinger this year. He's 22. He's an RFA. He's making pretty decent money right now, $2.2 million. But I think they're looking for him to have kind of that real breakout year where he gets a 25, 30 goal season or 60, 70 point season. The Russians too, Chinakhov, Voronkov, they're looking to, they got to find another gear to their game as well. There's just no two ways around it. And Marchenko has to take that next step and really be the 80, 90 point guy that he's capable of being. He just has to be. You know, Fantilli, I think, will only get better. I'm sure he's going to have another good year. I know they're waiting on, was it Caden Lindstrom? Why can I not think of his last name all of a sudden? The big center they just drafted in 2024. It's killing me that his name isn't coming. I think it's Caden Lindstrom, isn't it? Oh, no, this is killing me. Why can't this? See, this is why I need Andrew here. Oh, yeah, Caden Lindstrom. So, yeah, I know they're counting on him. And, again, he's a mammoth of a player, and he's great. And so when he gets up into the NHL, he's going to slide in perfectly. But he's not here yet. And with the Cleveland system, other than Luca Del Bel Belluz, who I think really deserves an honest shot in the NHL this year, none of the players in Cleveland really are jump off the page names where you're like, they got to get this guy a look, other than Jet Greaves, who I think is finally going to be getting his due this year. I think Elvis probably takes a back seat to Jet this year. And I think that's going to be one of the big game changers this year. I mean, really, you look at this Jackets teams, and it was flawed. It was flawed, and not having Johnny around sucked, and it hurt the team as far as not only emotionally, it was devastating, but on the ice it hurt too. I mean, his production is not something that they were able to replace really at all, and they still almost made the playoffs. And honestly, if not for the lack of quality goaltending, they would have been in there. I mean, came down to the last day of the season. If you get Elvis or Terry to make any fucking saves at any point last season and any of those games they lost, they're in the playoffs. So I think Jets showed at the end of the year he was up against he was in the toughest spot he could have been in as a young goalie trying to make a name. They're like, here, this hasn't worked all year with these goalies. We're going to drop you into it. drop you into this, get us into the playoffs. And I don't even remember if he lost a game. He was just unbelievable. I'm going to have to look up his stats as I'm doing this. But even if he did lose a game, he came in and he was unbelievable. His save percentage was nuts. Again, given what he was dropped into last year, Jet Greaves, and I'd have to see his numbers down the stretch, but last season, Jet Greaves, 11 games played, 7 wins, 2 shutouts, and those shutouts both came in that final week. 191 goals against average and 938 save percentage in his career, 21 games played. So Jet was 7-4 last year. He's 10-11 in his career with a 924. 10-11 with a 924. The team just stinks around him. And I'll be the first one to admit I was wrong about Jet, because I said for a while, I just don't think he's big enough. I just don't think he's got it. No, these numbers show that he's been ready, and this team has just been super mega ass for so long. But now this is a competent hockey team. They have, again, there's not that player other than Werenski, who we've known has been good for a long time. But in the forward group, there's not that one player where you're like, this is the guy. And on the back end, outside of Werenski, it's just a bunch of pretty good players. And now they have a chance to get better. And look how close they were this year. Even with all the crap they went through, they were that close to the playoffs. And I think Jet pushes them over the hump. I think the Jackets get into the playoffs this year. I truly believe it. And I'm going to start the movement now that the Jackets are going to the playoffs. But this team, again, even with all of these players on it, still has $16 million in cap space, which, again, a bummer that they couldn't get Marner, but him going to Vegas it seemed like that's what he wanted from the beginning. Can't blame the guy for going where he wants to go. So all they can do now is build with what they have, and there is talent there. They just need that talent to take the next step. These guys have all played pretty well given the spots they've been put in over the last several seasons. Now is the time to take that next step as a group. Most of these guys are between 20 and 25 years old, or 20 and 28 years old. And this is it. You got Jet coming in now. He's going to be the hot hand. And I think he's ready to take the next step and take them to the promised land where they're looking to go. They need to get into the playoffs. It's too good a fan base. It's too tortured a fan base to not put on a show and get this group into the playoffs. It's not a roster that's going to go win the Stanley Cup this year, but damn it, it'll be fun to get these guys some playoff experience and let them show who they really are. So we'll see. I'm going to end it on positive vibe. Let's get the Jackets into the playoffs. We're starting the movement today. Jet Greaves is taking them to the promised land. You heard it here first. Oh my God, that was a lot. I think what I've taken away from these last 2 weeks is that the show is way harder to do solo. First of all, just from a talking standpoint, I found it very difficult to talk for over 2 hours straight this week and almost an hour straight last week. My throat's just on fire right now. I've been pounding waters, but it hasn't been enough. And so what I've taken away is that you always need to appreciate what you have while you have it, because having Andrew on vacation for 2 of the busiest shows we've ever had, just as far as content, it's been tough. So I can't wait to have him back next week. Next week's episode will be our season finale. I want to revisit a couple of things from this week's show just so I can talk to him about it. Mainly the Panthers and the fact that they were able to bring their whole group back. But there's a couple other things I would like to talk on and kind of debate with him. I don't foresee us getting too much more groundbreaking news in the next week anyway. So I think to end the season, it would be perfect to have the opportunity to have a show where we get to go over a few of the biggest things together. Will be nice. And then we can kind of set up the summer and our plans for that. So again, this is not the last show. Next week's show will be our final show. And then we'll go from there. But thank you guys for sticking with me for these couple of weeks. It's obviously been a very unconventional show format, just me reporting news basically. But I'm ready to have Andrew back. I'm sure you guys are ready to have him back too, so we can have some normal discourse on this show. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for Xenopucks for sponsoring our show. Please get at us on social media with our Instagram at Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast and Facebook as well. I'll get your questions in, contact at freshicehockeypodcast.com. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for the season finale.